All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. We are going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and my colleagues are all ready. Councilmember McEwen is going to lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We'll have the roll call.
Councilmember Morena? Councilmember Morena?
Yeah, here.
Councilmember Hemmerich? Here. Councilmember McKeown?
Here.
Councilmember Winter?
Here.
Councilmember O'Hara?
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem O'Day?
Here.
And Mayor Davis?
Here. Thank you very much. All right, we will, I guess before we get started, I'll announce that staff has requested that item 1D be removed from the agenda, so I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
Motion to remove 1D.
All right, made by Morena, seconded by O'Day. I think we can do that on a voice vote.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No abstentions? All right, so 1D is removed from the agenda. So I think we're up to closed session, Ms. Anderson.
So we have closed session. Item 1A is a public employee evaluation, and the title is the city attorney. Next, we have a litigation. It's Pico Neighborhood Association and Maria Loya versus the city. Then we have another litigation. It's Supin versus the city of Santa Monica. And then minus 1D, we have one more anticipated litigation. It's one case, and you have one request to speak.
All right. Denise Barton. Oh, sorry. Let me turn your mic on. I apologize.
Good evening. Going back to the district voting case, which you lost, let's again go back to the contradicting statements you and the city have made about the case. Starting with the one of the most appalling, the city states that the district system may work well in larger cities like Los Angeles, but dividing up Santa Monica's 8.3 square mile community would put neighborhood against neighborhood. Yet in another statement, the city clearly acknowledges that cities with fewer than 10,000 residents have been sued or threatened to be regarding district voting, with most municipalities settling before litigation. So what makes Santa Monica different than any of these other smaller municipalities? Because in my research, I found no justification for it. Which would bring us back to your argument that the city has had at-large elections since 1946, but didn't the court find that it deliberately discriminates against minority voters? You discriminate against Latino voters just like you discriminate against the disabled and elderly by not having a permanent ADA person. So when legitimate ADA complaints are brought to the temporary rotating ADA person, you're told to get a lawyer. Ending with the most appalling contradiction, because the city council is saying it wants the residents' input on districts, when in reality you told your lawyers the stakeholders' input is what you really want. And on what grounds would you appeal this case on, since the Poway case fell through and all your other arguments have been found to be illegal? Oh, and by the way, how do you plan to pay the residents back for the $10 to $20 million of city funds used to pursue this conflict of interest for you while in office? Thank you.
Thank you. I will consult with the city attorney. Given what we have on our agenda, what time do you anticipate we'll be back?
6:30.
All right, we will reconvene at 6:30. Thank you. All right, I'm going to start here.
Hi, I'm here to interpret for you into Spanish.
Right, so I'm going to try and speak slowly, but if I go too fast, throw something.
And if you could pause often, that's also great, so that I can interpret between your pauses.
I will definitely try to remember to do that.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start up here, and then I will move down to the podium so that we can pass out commendations this evening.
Voy a empezar desde aquí, luego voy a bajar a esta parte para que podamos pasar los reconocimientos.
Tonight we have in attendance a group of community members who went above and beyond through their leadership in the pilot round of well-being microgrants.
Ahora tenemos un grupo de presidentes comunitarios que realmente hicieron más allá de lo que esperábamos para las becas de well-being.
Tonight we celebrate and commend the wisdom, energy, and action of these people in our community and our community as a whole.
Ahora queremos reconocer la sabiduría, la acción, la energía de estas personas que son miembros de nuestra comunidad.
We would also like to thank the following entities for their support of the Wellbeing Microgrants. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Culture of Health 2016 Prize provided the funding for the microgrants.
También nos gustaría agradecer a los siguientes financieros de esta beca, incluyendo a la Fundación de Cultura de Robert Wood Johnson. Es un premio de salud de 2016.
Cities of Service supported the development of the microgrant program.
Cities of Service o ciudades de servicio apoyaron el desarrollo de este programa de micro becas.
City Grows partnered as the online platform for the application process.
City Grows fue un socio para apoyar lo que es la plataforma en línea para el proceso de aplicaciones.
Staff from the Virginia Avenue Park Center and the Pico Branch Library provided invaluable outreach, support, and partnership.
Personal del centro de Virginia Avenue Park, Parque Virginia, la Avenida de Virginia, y Pico Branch Library, la biblioteca de Pico, provieron promoción comunitaria que no tiene valor, apoyo, y también fueron socios en el proyecto.
And city departments, in particular finance, the city attorney's office, and housing and economic development's farmers market division all contributed to the success of this program.
Y también departamentos de la ciudad, incluyendo el departamento de finanzas, la oficina del abogado, la abogada de la ciudad, también la división del mercado de el farmers market, el desarrollo económico y de vivienda, contribuyeron al éxito de este programa.
This evening we have representatives from Antenna Los Angeles facilitating interpretation into Spanish. I'll sneak in another sentence. Antenna Los Angeles is dedicated to language justice advocacy and organizing locally in Los Angeles.
Esta tarde tenemos representantes de Antena Los Ángeles facilitando la interpretación al español. Antena Los Ángeles se dedica a la abogacía de justicia del lenguaje y a organizar localmente en Los Ángeles.
They believe that everyone has the basic human right to speak in the language or languages in which they feel most comfortable at a given time.
Esas personas creen que cada persona tiene el derecho humano de hablar en los lenguajes en que se siente más cómodo o cómoda en cualquier momento.
Their work creating multilingual spaces within the Pico Wellbeing Project has made public meetings more accessible to Santa Monicans.
Su trabajo de crear espacios multilingües dentro del proyecto de Pico Wellbeing ha hecho que las reuniones públicas sean más accesibles a las personas de Santa Mónica.
So what I'm going to do now is read the general commendations, and then I'll come down to the podium and present the specific certificates.
Entonces lo que voy a hacer ahora es leer los reconocimientos generales y luego voy a bajar a esta parte para dar los reconocimientos individuales.
So this is the commendation.
Este es el reconocimiento.
Whereas in 2018, the Office of Civic Wellbeing issued its first ever call for resident-driven projects to address findings from the Wellbeing Index.
Así es que en el 2018 la Oficina de Civic Wellbeing dio por primera vez o hizo un llamado por primera vez para proyectos liderados por residentes para abordar lo que había encontrado el índice de Wellbeing.
Whereas 10 residents were selected for 8 Wellbeing Microgrants, a $500 award designed to increase neighbor-to-neighbor connections, address isolation and loneliness, and build trust and inclusion in the Pico neighborhood.
Así es que fueron 10 residentes que fueron seleccionados para 8 micro becas de Wellbeing. $500 fue el premio designado para incrementar conexiones entre vecinos y vecinas, también abordar el aislamiento, la soledad y crear confianza y inclusión dentro del vecindario de Pico.
Whereas each project was selected based on the strength of the idea, implementation plan, and creativity in bringing community together.
Y así fue que cada proyecto fue seleccionado a base de la fortaleza de la idea, la plan de implementación y la creatividad de unir a la comunidad.
And whereas each microgrant recipient successfully fulfilled their responsibility and commitment to participation, leadership, reporting, and measurement.
Como fue que cada persona que recibió el microbeca con éxito pudo llevar su responsabilidad y compromiso a participación, liderazgo, dar informaciones, informes y también de poder medir el proyecto.
And whereas the 8 projects reached over 630 people via 26 neighborhood events and activities over 4 months for a total of just $4,000.
Y también fue que los 8 proyectos pudieron alcanzar 630 personas por medio de 26 eventos en el vecindario Pico, y las actividades tomaron lugar a través de 4 meses por un total de $4,000.
Now, therefore, I, Gleam Davis, Mayor of the City of Santa Monica, on behalf of all the members of the City Council of the City of Santa Monica, do hereby commend and recognize, and then I'm going to come down there and name everybody individually.
Y así es que yo, alcalde Gleam Davis de la ciudad de Santa Mónica, de parte de la membresía del Consejo de la Ciudad, de este modo doy un elogio y reconozco a las siguientes personas y voy a bajar a hacerlo.
Oh, great. I thought we were going to have to share a mic. Great. So first I'd like to commend Chiara Arroyo and Daniela Webster. Wiener. I'm so sorry.
Primero quisiera reconocer a Chiara Arroyo y Daniela Wiener. Disculpa.
This is for Chiara?
Yes, thank you. I'll give it the envelope. Para Chiara.
And this is for Daniela. And Chiara and Daniela did a well-being microgrant project called Escuchamos para Entender, We Listen to Understand, bringing together elementary age students to record Spanish language interviews with elders in the community.
Chiara Arroyo y Daniela Wiener para la beca, la microbeca del Wellbeing Project. Escuchamos para entender, We Listen to Understand, que une a estudiantes de la primaria para grabar entrevistas en el lenguaje de español con personas mayores en la comunidad.
All right, now I'd like to recognize, stay up here just right over there. We're going to take a picture at the end. We don't do anything without
No
photographs.
hacemos cualquier cosa sin hacer una foto también.
Now I'd like to recognize Rebecca Behur.
Me gustaría reconocer ahora a Rebecca Behur.
And Rebecca did a pop-up adventure playground, bringing together neighbors of all ages to transform an empty lot into an urban oasis of connection, creativity, and child-directed play. Rebecca, thank you so much.
Rebecca
Who's this with
hizo
you?
un pop-up adventure
Nathan.
playground que
Nice to meet you, Mason.
trajo a vecinos de todas edades a transformar un lote vacío a un lugar lindo, urbano, de conexión, creatividad y juego para niños y niñas.
All right, may I call up Shirley Compton?
Me gustaría llamar ahora a Shirley Compton.
All right, Shirley did a community engagement luncheon, a collaborative event for Pico neighborhood community organizations involved in civic engagement and social projects supporting African American youth, culture, and achievement, both past and present, and also future, I'm sure.
Shirley Compton hizo una comida para la comunidad, Community Engagement Luncheon, el evento colaborativo para organizaciones comunitarias del vecindario. Involucró a las entidades cívicas y también proyectos sociales apoyando a los jóvenes afroamericanos, la cultura, el logro en el pasado, el presente y seguramente en el futuro también.
And I should mention that Ibanitzia Fisher also participated in that, but she couldn't be here this evening.
También debo mencionar que Benicia Fisher también participó en eso, pero no pudo participar hoy.
Right, Elena Hernandez.
Elena Hernández.
Elena's microgrant project was lowering stress while learning to knit, a series of knitting classes emphasizing stress relief through manual activities for residents of the Pico neighborhood.
Elena Hernández hizo un proyecto bajando el estrés mientras aprendiendo a tejer, una serie de clases de tejido, enfatizando lo que es el alivio del estrés por medio de actividades como manualidades para residentes del vecindario Pico.
Janine Jackson. Janine did the project My Community Kitchen, a neighborhood gathering promoting community connections through good old-fashioned fun. I like that. And creation and distribution of a community cookbook, which I'm sure we would all love to use.
Y Janine Jackson hizo My Community Kitchen, o Mi Cocina Comunitaria, que fue unir y promover conexiones comunitarias en una manera básicamente divertida por medio de la creación y la distribución de un libro de recetas para la comunidad que seguramente todos quisiéramos ver.
All right, thank you. And then two folks who could not join us tonight, but I want to recognize their work are... Oh, all right.
Dos personas
Marco
que no,
Marin.
tal vez no estaban así, pero alguien acaba de llegar, Marco Marín.
All right. And Marco, along with Mulugeta Tadele from the Wellbeing Microgrant Project, Latino and Ethiopian Community Workshops, a set of workshops that brought together the Latino and Ethiopian communities in the Pico neighborhood to discuss shared experiences and challenges. Marco, I'm so glad you could make it.
Marco Marín.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
All right. Just go stand there. We're going to get some pictures, and I'm going to hand you this because it might be raining when you get
Hizo un
out.
proyecto de latino, de talleres comunitarios latinos etiopíes, que fue una serie de talleres que unió a las comunidades latinas y etiopíes en el vecindario Pico para discutir experiencias y retos compartidos.
All right, Carmela Morales for the Wellbeing Microgrant Project, Paper Flower Baskets, a series of creative crafting workshops with a focus on sharing traditional art skills and forming new friendships. Carmela, thank you so much.
Carmela Morales hizo un proyecto llamado Canastas de Flores de Papel, una serie de talleres para hacer artesanías creativas con el enfoque de compartir habilidades tradicionales de arte y formar nuevas amistades. Gracias.
And last but certainly not least, Sofia Ramirez. She did the Wellbeing Microgrant Project Farmers Market Healthy Cooking Class, a series of workshops sharing simple and healthy recipes to encourage community connections for children, teens, and parents. We all know we gather around food.
Sofía Ramírez, la última, pero seguramente no la menor en calidad, es un proyecto que fue una clase de comida, Farmers Market Healthy Cooking Class, de comida saludable del Farmers Market, una serie de talleres compartiendo recetas saludables y simples y animando conexiones entre la comunidad, entre niños, jóvenes y también papás y mamás. Muchas gracias.
So we want to thank you all for your dedication and service to the community, and in particular for your creativity in thinking about ways to make our community stronger.
Quisiéramos darles las gracias por su dedicación y su servicio a la comunidad y en particular por su creatividad para poder saber cómo mejorar nuestra comunidad.
All right. And since nothing ever happened, if we don't have a picture, we're going to take a
No
picture
se
right up
sabe
here.
que algo pasó si no tomamos la foto, entonces la vamos a tomar acá.
That was fun. All right, will Ms. Anderson-Moore move on to the next item?
Before we go on, I wanted to ask if any council members have anything to report out on travel since last week. No? Seeing no one? Okay, so next we'll go on to the consent calendar. All items will be considered and approved in one motion unless removed by a council member for discussion, and you have 2 requests to speak.
All right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, they're hiding here. Oh, I'm just trying to figure this out. Okay, I got them. All right, first we'll have Denise Barton and then Ann Thanawala. Oh, Greg, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Oh, all right, well, after we do the public comment.
Good evening. I must say you talk a good game. Just like with the scooters, you can put into place as many restrictions as you want to. Although if there's no enforcement, like with the scooters, it really means nothing. Just something for you to brag you did for another photo op or another fake award. Isn't one for well-being coming soon? Can anyone else relate to these expressions about the city of Santa Monica? Dirty, unsafe, and overcrowded. Living downtown, I can relate to all of these expressions. But to this city, it's not the residents that count, but the homeless people, which can be seen by the over $2.5 million cost to the residents that now have to take care of them. And here's the real question that has to be, does this not bring more homeless here at a bigger cost to the residents? All to present an interim image of the city. Then just so you know, the dirty, unsafe, and overcrowded comment was made about Hollywood, and Los Angeles wasn't much better. And isn't Los Angeles where you've been basing a lot of your recent actions from? Well, according to a Reddit thread last month, Los Angeles is one of the biggest letdowns in the world, said by tourists. And I'm sure Santa Monica isn't far behind. So how did we get here? Due to the city council's actions that were based on self-interest, money, and greed. Now, not what was in the best interest of the residents, community, or city as a whole. You ranted and raved about how the expo line was going to be so great, yet in reality this is the result, dirtiness, unsafeness, and overcrowding due to it. And now you want the residents to pay more because of it. So here's an idea. Stop overdevelopment and overcrowding exceeding what we were sold when you adopted loose. And maybe you need to better manage and control the crowds that leave trash all over the city, commit crimes, and add to the homeless population here. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Thanawala?
Because of my throat, I've recorded something. It's easier. I've got a
Oh, I'm sorry.
sore throat, so I'm just going to play
Oh, okay.
when my throat was a little better.
That's fine.
Good evening, City Council. I'm requesting that you reject item 3B, the stairwell piece, because it is not public artwork. Described as a light painting, the piece is an original, private site-specific work. For those of you not familiar with the term, site-specific art is defined as artwork created to exist in a certain place. The light painting is intended for a private stairwell within the city services building. One art commissioner emailed me upon my inquiry to say, quote, "When the piece is complete and the annex open to the public, the commission will explore ways to provide some direct access to the piece from within the building," end quote. This is unacceptable and identifies a failed process. Public access is a requirement for public art. It must never be an afterthought to be fixed. I'd like to discuss specifics of the light painting. In addition to being designed specifically for the private stairwell as an experiential work for the city staff as they traverse the intimate stairwell space, the light painting employs natural sunlight as its primary medium. In fact, natural sunlight is critically integral to achieving the artist's objective. The other medium, dichroic glass, is used as the color field through which sunlight will pass to activate the light painting. Therefore, the dichroic glass is the passive medium, whereas the natural sunlight is the active ingredient that makes the work come alive and achieve the intent of the titled work, light painting. Another reason we do not consider light painting a public artwork is because public views can only be accessed at night, only from the other side of the glass wall, and is only seen through the aid of artificial lighting. Therefore, the public is denied access to the original work produced by the primary ingredient, which is natural sunlight, so any claim made to the effect that the piece will be viewed 24 hours a day, 365 days each year, is grossly inept, because the question of who has access to view the original site-specific work can only be answered by saying, not the public.
Thank you, Ms. Thanawala.
Thank you.
All right, council, the matter is before us. Mr. Morena?
I'd like to pull 3B.
All right, anyone else want to pull any items? All right, then I'll entertain a
I'd like
motion.
to pull 3D.
3D? All right, so we have 3B and 3D pulled.
I will move the remainder of the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, moved by McEwen, seconded by O'Day. I think we'll need a roll call vote, Ms. Anderson-Warren?
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yes.
Councilmember McKeown,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmelrich,
Yes.
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes, that passes unanimously.
So
All
let
right.
me read. Item 3B is approval of city services building artwork fabrication contract.
Do you need a staff report, Mr. Moreno, or did you just want?
No, just a couple of quick questions I think would be pretty easy to answer. So thank you to the department for answering my myriad of questions before the meeting. I love the idea of a budget of 1% to the arts. That's really clear to me now, what we're doing. I just wanted to clarify, there was a article in the paper that it would only be visible from inside, but it is visible from inside and outside. Is that correct?
Correct. This is actually the most publicly visible part of the building because it's a 3-story tall, basically light painting that you
Yeah.
need to be outside to see the full scale of.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And then the other question was, I know that we're not exhausting the entire budget on the painting. And have you thought about, I don't know the right word, so excuse me if I'm wrong, but the marketing of the piece and how we're going to promote all of the great qualities of the piece and how you should come to the new city services building and see the beautiful work?
We have not yet. That's a great idea, and but we are actually thinking about marketing holistically the arts in Santa Monica a lot more and putting kind of pieces and resources in place to do so.
Great. Thank you.
All right, does someone want to move 3B?
I move 3B.
Second.
All right, moved by Himmelrich, seconded by Morena. May we have a roll call vote, Ms. Anderson-Warren?
Councilmember Morena,
Yes.
Councilmember Himmelrich,
Yes.
Councilmember McKeown,
Yes.
Councilmember Winter,
Yes.
Councilmember Hara,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Councilmember Hara, you wanted to pull 3D. Do you need a staff report?
No, I would like to recuse myself from that because I work for Santa Monica College, and even though KCRW does not, my income is not based on KCRW, I just want to make sure that for transparency's sakes that I do not vote on this item or participate in the discussion.
All right, then I think we'll have to ask you to leave the room. Those are the rules of recusal. But don't go far.
I don't feel so lonely anymore and having to recuse myself on all those school district things over the years, even though they had nothing to do with my income. And in June, I will have been gone from the school district for a year, and I'll consult with the city attorney's office, but I think at that point I'll no longer need to recuse myself on school district matters.
Well, excellent.
But
Well, I'm always...
anyhow, I've vamped long enough to get Councilmember Hara out of the room.
That's right. I'll entertain a
I'd
motion
like
on
to
item
move
3D.
Second.
Okay, moved by O'Day, seconded by Winter. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Anderson-Warren, may we have a roll call vote?
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day?
Yes.
Councilmember Winter?
Yes.
Councilmember McKeown?
Yes.
Councilmember Himmelrich?
Yes.
Councilmember Morena?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes, that passes unanimously of the 6 of us. And if someone can make hand gestures to Councilmember Hara, we'll get started on the next item.
Next, we have item 4A, strategies to address park and beach safety, public health, maintenance, and activation. And you now have 4 requests to speak.
All right.
Good evening, council members. I'm Danielle Noble. I'm the Assistant Director of the Community and Cultural Services Department.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I was so busy trying to work my iPad. Technology gets in the way every time. I believe our city attorney's in the queue.
Mayor Davis, before discussion of this item, I'd like to recuse myself and step down from the dais based on property that I own across the street from a park. And given the wide-ranging nature of the study session, because we can't anticipate in what directions you go, out of an abundance of caution, I'll be stepping down from the item.
All right, thank you. And Councilmember Morena, was that from the last item?
No, this is this one.
Okay.
I'm going to recuse myself from this item because the broad nature of the curfew and the potential issue of the beach crossing over the pier. I'm going to take off.
All right. Well, we'll send you both
To
over.
clarify, you have ownership in a business on the pier. That's the connection.
Correct.
And the beach crosses under the pier. Right?
That's right. But hopefully the pier doesn't crash onto the beach. And we'll expect Starbucks when you all return. All right, any other recusal statements that I've missed? Okay, thanks.
I'm doing it right now.
I just had that problem. You can download the web-based agenda and get all the reports.
Okay.
Well, I just did it and it worked. Because I couldn't get the PDF one to work.
All right, well, apparently there is some issue. Technology strikes again. I'm having a bad night with that. But apparently Councilmember Winter says if you download the web-based agenda for people who are watching us on TV, you can get the most recent version of everything. Is there any other alternative method if that doesn't work? All right, and it may just be up on the city's website as well. All right, good. Okay, so it's available on the city's website as well. Thank you, Ms. Noble, for all of that procedural delay. Let's get started.
Thank you. So tonight we're here to talk about park and beach safety, public health, maintenance, and activation. And city staff is aware of increasing community concerns about safety in local parks and at the beach. So this report addresses the safety, public health, maintenance, and activation of the city's parks and beachfront. Some of the proposed strategies we'll discuss tonight require new one-time or new ongoing funding, and so we are seeking council direction on the activities and funding requests to include within the city's upcoming biennial and capital improvement budget processes. So tonight's study session follows discussions that happened at council and with the Recreation and Parks Commission in the past. In light of concerns raised by residents, the Recreation and Parks Commission discussed park safety strategies in October 2018, made recommendations to council which were heard in November 2018, held a public hearing in January 2019, and identified its funding priorities. Attached to your staff report are 2 letters from the Commission. Public spaces should be welcoming, safe, and accessible to all. Safety is a city value, and keeping neighborhoods safe is a city framework priority. Safety has at least 2 dimensions: the documented level of criminal, dangerous, or antisocial behavior in our parks and at the beach, and the perception of safety among park and beach users. While people experiencing homelessness often spend time in parks and at the beach, this is not a report about homelessness. An interdepartmental team will present a comprehensive Reducing Homelessness Plan of Action to you on April 30th. The strategies presented in this report further the city's vision of a welcoming, safe, and accessible public space for all. Staff believes that safety in public spaces can be enhanced through activation, improvements to infrastructure, ongoing maintenance, monitoring, reporting, and enforcement, as well as access to services and amenities. To that end, we have identified 9 strategies. The city and its partners have significant responsibilities. However, the management of public spaces often also benefits from community involvement. Active and appropriate use of spaces demonstrates model behavior and deters criminal behavior. The city dedicates considerable resources to crafting local laws that follow judicial guidance, protect spaces for use by all, and facilitate enforcement by sworn and non-sworn personnel. The City Attorney's Office and the Police Department have full authority to enforce laws when crimes are committed and do enforce. There are roles for partners and the public, too. The Santa Monica Municipal Code restricts solicitation, prohibits camping in public spaces, and lying in Main Street and downtown doorways at night. There are other laws, like nuisance abatement laws, that are used to protect public spaces. Beyond laws, there are behavior-based rules set by the Director of CCS for parks, beaches, and facilities. Staff continually evaluates existing laws and practices and identifies the need for new. Laws are enforced by sworn personnel, including homeless liaison or HELP team members, who often work in partnership with service providers like the Department of Mental Health. There are also 29 non-sworn public services officers, 29 of whom are responsible for patrolling the parks and downtown areas. PSOs have been deployed full-time to 5 specific parks, Palisades, Tongva, Reed, Memorial, and Virginia Avenue, over the last 6 months, and are in the parks from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. 2 PSOs start work at 4 a.m. Monday through Thursday to address violations of park closure hours and camping. The HELP team also works with West Coast Care, a group that does outreach on the beach and in Tongva and Palisades parks, and offers referrals to shelter and other resources, including reconnecting people with family through Project Homecoming. There are other ways that services are brought to people. SMPD and local service providers hold outreach events in parks. Police conduct special operations in parks. The department's mobile command post has been stationed in Palisades and Reed parks, and mounted patrol officers are often in parks during the weekends, all of which creates a highly visible police presence and field-based services. The police department uses timely incident statistics to deploy officers to trouble spots. Last year, most of the calls for service in parks and a majority of calls at the beach were initiated by PSOs and police officers rather than the public. The majority of reported crimes committed in Santa Monica's parks and at the beach are low-level public order crimes, such as drinking or smoking in public and public camping. We encourage people to report criminal activity to the non-emergency dispatch line. New signage with this message has been placed in Reed and Memorial Parks. At any time, incidents, concerns, and requests for maintenance and social services can be reported through Santa Monica Works, the city's virtual city hall, which can be downloaded from the App Store. Downtown Santa Monica, Inc. has been providing hospitality services in Tongva and Palisades Parks since 2016. The program has been well received and has had a positive impact on visitors' perceptions of safety and cleanliness, particularly near restrooms. It's clear that hospitality services are a promising practice. However, new ongoing funding is needed to establish additional hospitality services. In partnership with peer tenants, the city is exploring the idea of forming a business improvement district of pier and adjacent oceanfront walk businesses. Funds generated through the business improvement district could be used for hospitality services for the bid. Last year, as a response to the hepatitis A outbreak in the Los Angeles region, soap dispensers were installed in all park and beach restrooms, and a pilot steam cleaning program was initiated at the beach restrooms. Staff is planning to establish beach restroom steam cleaning as regular and ongoing maintenance. Staff continually assesses our parks, adjusts landscape palettes and maintenance schedules, changes light fixtures and lighting levels, and makes capital and safety improvements. Many projects, such as replacing the Palisades Park baton courts, converting light fixtures to LEDs, reconstructing Clover Park restrooms, and improvements to the restrooms in Reed, Memorial, and Gandara parks, are funded. Not currently funded is an assessment of Tongva Park's lighting and any improvements, as well as placing security cameras and emergency phones in parks. This fall, 4 boxes for hypodermic needle disposal were installed in 2 beach restrooms as a pilot. These boxes are available 24 hours a day, and it's estimated that over 200 needles have been collected to date. Staff will evaluate an expansion of this program to additional restrooms. In tandem, outreach workers in Palisades and Tongva Park offer high-risk drug users information about safe syringe exchange, counseling, and treatment options. The Santa Monica State Beach, which exists in the multi-regulatory environment of the City of Santa Monica, the State Parks Department, and the California Coastal Commission, has never had a beach curfew. The beach is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Beach curfews require a presentation of credible evidence demonstrating the existence of a public safety problem warranting the imposition of a beach curfew and careful consideration of alternatives. Staff will pursue development of additional beach regulations as necessary. Reiterating that homelessness is not a crime, the city recognizes that some of the visible criminal or antisocial behavior in parks is committed by people living on our streets. Reducing and preventing homelessness is congruent with making our parks and beach safer for all. Using one-time funds in 2015 and again in 2017, the city expanded capacity to engage homeless people on the streets and in public spaces through the creation of 2 new field-based treatment teams operated by the people concerned: the Homeless Multidisciplinary Street Team, which we call the Hamster Team, and the Santa Monica County, City, and Community, or C3 Team. The Hamster Team focuses on the highest users of city police and fire services. The C3 Team engages those in the downtown area, in Tongva Park, and in Reed Park. People have been placed into housing as well as connected to medical and mental health services. Local funding for both teams will expire on June 30th, 2019. There are 3 additional multidisciplinary teams, partially funded through Measure H, operating on the west side through St. Joseph Center. These teams respond to outreach requests in areas not covered by the C3 team, and staff is working to fold these regional teams into local beach outreach strategies. The next step is to create by-name lists of the people who are often in Tongva and Reed parks and develop individualized care plans for park regulars. The city has a long-standing policy which encourages food distribution at indoor locations where services are available. People who distribute free meals in city parks must comply with local and state laws, including obtaining a city event permit for gatherings of 150 people or more. A new state law requires organizations that want to charitably feed the public to register as limited service charitable feeding operations, pay a fee, and dictates the type of food that can be distributed, generally uncut produce, prepackaged food, commercially prepared food, or frozen food. The County of Los Angeles' Public Health Department is responsible for providing information on this new law, managing the permit registration process, and conducting complaint-based investigations. An activated park is a more welcoming park, which is why the city uses park space for community classes and camps, has created incentives for Reed Park commercial fitness trainers, and initiated new events in Reed Park in 2017, expanding programming in 2018 and 2019. However, staff lacks the resources to further expand the Meet Me at Reed series or add more programming to other parks. We encourage the public to take ownership of their neighborhood open spaces and organize park activations. An online training curriculum to build understanding and awareness about how to engage with people experiencing homelessness is in production. The first set of videos will post this week to the city's YouTube channel and shortly to the We Are Santa Monica page. We encourage everyone to watch the videos and use the information to positively engage with people experiencing homelessness. The following park and beach data points will be used to measure and evaluate the strategies detailed in this report. Data will be used to gauge the impact of the strategies and inform changes. We will track PSO's presence and responses in parks and outcomes for those on the New Tongva and Reed Park service registries. We will also track the number of outreach events in parks, park rule violations, and completed park capital improvement projects. In addition to metrics related to park activations and the use of sharps containers in beach restrooms. On January 17th of this year, the Recreation and Parks Commission were presented with a very similar report and made a number of recommendations to the Council, including priorities for the city's biennial and capital improvement budgets, direction in support of programs and operations specific to parks and the beach, use of nuisance abatement strategies, as well as additional local shelter capacity. Again, a letter from the Commission is attached to the staff report. Tonight's study session offered an overview of 9 strategies to address the safety, public health, maintenance, and activation of the city's parks and beachfront, and beach and park specific metrics. Some proposed strategies require new one-time or new ongoing funding. We're seeking council direction on the activities and funding requests to include within the city's upcoming biennial and capital improvement budget processes. This concludes my report. I'm available for questions, as are my colleagues from the City Attorney's Office, the Police Department, and the Public Works Department.
Thank you, Ms. Noble. I think we have some questions. Councilmember Winterer.
So you noted that some of the funding that we've had for our homeless outreach street teams is expired. Didn't we get some money from Supervisor Kuehl for the C3 team?
We did. That was money that we were expecting, and it helps fund the teams through 2019. We are still seeking additional funding to continue them into the next biennial cycle.
So we don't know yet whether she might be able to provide us some additional funds for the next fiscal year.
She gave us about $600,000 over 2 years, and when we negotiated with her, that was what we asked for originally.
But have we gone back and asked for more, or is that in politics?
I have not been part of those conversations. I think at this point, the signal that we got from the supervisor's office is that was her contribution.
Okay.
We can certainly circle back, but at this point, we're not expecting it.
All right, thank you. And then I had an email exchange with Ms. Ginsburg about one aspect of park activation, which is the number of trainers we've had in the park. It's because that's a low to no cost way for the city to activate the parks. She explained to me that the numbers have been fairly consistent over the years, but have gone down this year. We hope because of the inclement weather, and that we at one point we had some trainers working since we waived the fees to work in Reed Park. We had some trainers working there, but again, none this year. And again, we hope because of the weather. So I assume, that might not be a major metric for us, but certainly a metric to pay attention to, because that's certainly a great way to activate the parks.
Yeah. For those of you who weren't in the communication, we have had up to 6 trainers at Reed Park, and we do it quarterly. So this quarter, January through March, we haven't had any. We do believe that it's weather related. Last January we had 2. So we've looked back from 2014, since the program was established in 2014. We plan to do some marketing to try to attract some trainers back to Reed and even the other parks for spring.
We went so far as to waive the fees other than the base insurance requirements and business license for Reed Park. We thought about additional incentives that maybe if you got a permit for Reed and say Clover Park, you could have a reduced fee for the Clover Park section, just to try to get some more people in Reed Park. It seems to me such a great way to activate. I think we have that nice balance now where we're not hearing from the public that the parks are overrun with trainers. But if we're seeing declining numbers, maybe we've got to think about ways to get them back in there.
We certainly can do that.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Himmelrich.
Thank you, and thank you for that report. So a couple of things. First of all, I should note that at 6:35 we just got yet another 2 pages of suggestions from the chair of the Parks and Rec. Have you seen this, or possible strategies? Have you seen this 2 pages yet?
I have not seen that, no.
Well, if I could print it for you, I would, but maybe I'll just forward it to you.
Okay.
But I was just curious if you had seen it, because, of course, it's always hard for us, as we always say, when we're here, to get these emails. We've been in session since 4:30 today, so I just noticed it as I was trying to pull up my agenda. And again, I'll forward it to you, but I'm guessing it's in your mailbox, too. And you've mentioned many of the things in this email, but I do have one question, and that is the idea that neighbors should organize their own park activation. And I wonder if you've thought about ways that they should do that, and whether we can provide any funding for them to do that. And when I say funding, I'm not talking about actually funding the activities, because I assume that's where we ran out of money, but rather funding the kinds of activities. In other words, ideas about what can be organized to activate the parks, because I think that I think it's hard after, let's say, we've been activating or trying to activate Reed Park for all this time, to just put it on them is difficult, and I wonder if we have some strategies for helping them to activate their own parks.
There are quite a number of strategies that have been developed by park associations, organizations that do this in conjunction with park agencies, and those resources are certainly available on the internet. And something that we could do would be to make those resources more available, more visible for neighbors and neighborhood organizations, so they could have ideas from other places and see if they're applicable here in Santa Monica.
And I know that for a time we were doing neighborhood block parties. We had a competition for a neighborhood block party, and I wonder if we couldn't move that to neighborhood, I did say that right, whether we could move that as a neighborhood park party, or do something like that to assist in activating the parks with the neighborhoods.
I'm not familiar with the neighborhood block parties that you are speaking of. I don't know if somebody could help me. I mean, we certainly encourage people to come in the parks. If they're less than 150 people in the group, they don't need a permit. Parks are available, most hours of the day. We saw quite a good turnout at the Meet Me at Reed events, where people from the neighborhood were walking down the street with their picnic baskets and their chairs, and there was a lot of organic community building happening at those events, as well as I could tell that people were coming in groups.
So is what you're saying that a neighborhood could in fact organize their own Meet Me at Reed event, that sort of thing?
As long as there's less than 150 people, they absolutely could.
Well, how would they know in advance how many people will be there?
That's something we would ask the organizers to take leadership on and figure out, given the scope, given the invitation list, how many people do they expect? If they have 150 people or more, they need to apply for an event permit. It's absolutely doable. It happens across the city all year long, and we'd be happy to support them through that process.
And let me ask you this. So if we do that, and if we encourage them to do that, are we going to, for instance, waive permit fees, et cetera, and make it otherwise easier for them to do this?
That's something we could look at. I would have to come back with you with more information.
I'm just saying, if we're shifting the paradigm, so we're asking the park neighborhoods to activate the parks in a way that we traditionally have done it, whether we can make it super easy for them to do that.
We can certainly look at that.
Great, thank you.
I think the city manager wanted to weigh in on that.
I think you both answered the questions, other than to say that we obviously aren't going to be out there counting if there's 151 people and issue a citation. And secondly, you set the fees for park permits, and so we would consult with the city attorney to understand how we could craft a fee that would apply to activation in a positive way that doesn't commercialize the parks, which is how we ended up in the whole trainer battle in the first place. So there are some concerns that we can't just wave on the fly, but it's absolutely in the spirit that you're suggesting, is that we want to make it as easy as possible for people to utilize the parks for what they're meant for, which is for positive activities, organized and unorganized.
All right, Councilmember Hara.
Hi. There were a couple of suggestions that were on the letter, and I wanted to kind of do a little bit of follow-up with you. They spoke about bringing or reinstating park rangers. Can you tell us a little bit about that feasibility and what would that look like?
So I'm going to turn to my colleagues from the police department and ask them to help me with this answer.
Good evening. Could I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. So the Parks and Recs recommended that we reinstate park rangers, and I wanted to know what that feasibility would look like and whether or not they would be working, if they were to be reinstated, whether or not they would be working in conjunction with the police department, and basically what would that look like?
Thank you, Councilmember Hara. So the park rangers never went away. There were different entities within the police department that worked in different areas of the city, but they all had the same level of training and performed essentially the same security role function, but in different parts of the city. Several years ago, there was a move to generalize them and have them all trained so that they could work at either location in the city, the parks, the downtown, or the airport. And in that move, they were renamed public safety officers. It's still the same human beings that were park rangers that we're fortunate enough to have as our public safety officers with us now. As we are staffing in the parks, as you heard in the staff report, on April 14th, when the police department redeploys, we will also institute a new 4-divisional organizational chart. And in that chart, they will still be called public safety officers, but we will have dedicated people attached to the sworn officers who are working in the parks into a single chain of command for better effect and better connection between the CCS people and employees who staff the park and also the people who frequent the parks, so that they see the same PSOs time after time, get to know them, feel comfortable with them, hopefully get on a first name basis, and have a good communication and rapport moving forward. So the function does still exist. We're looking to redeploy it with a little bit more purpose, a little bit more focus, and to partner them more closely with the sworn police officers who are doing work in the parks.
Thank you. Do you have some more questions?
Yes.
Okay. This might be for staff, and even though I might be in conjunction with the two of you, the statistics or the data that we are going to be collecting, can you tell me what exactly is it that we're looking for so that we are going to be moving forward after that data, and what are we going to be doing with it?
So some of the data is just tracking our impact in the spaces. So how many resources are we putting in spaces? And when you look at that data combined with the interventions that we may be putting in places like outreach teams, we hope to see that strategic investments in outreach teams, for example, or in bodies in parks will reduce the number of calls for service, or will reduce the number of incidents, or will the hospitality ambassadors statistics will change. So really we'll be looking at all the data across the board and trying to see if there are correlations between a strategy that we've tried and a metric we may collect over 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 months.
Thank you. The other question that I had was that they were also talking about restricting crimes or restricting the park for anyone who has committed the park crimes. I would like to know what those are.
Councilmember Hara, I'll try to answer that question. I believe the recommendation was that when there are violations of certain crimes that are committed that persons be excluded from the park, and that could be answered in numerous ways. First of all, when there are violations that are crimes that are committed and when that person is convicted, the city prosecutors or the district attorney's office oftentimes will seek stay-away orders based on requests from our law enforcement partners like SMPD, and those stay-away orders will cause those convicted persons to stay away from the park to the extent that a court will authorize it. And so that is already happening. There are many, many, many stay-away orders already pending. The police chief could probably give you even more specifics if she would like.
That is a tool that we use very frequently. The work that the public safety officers and that the help officers and the police officers do in our parks and our open spaces is very deep and very involved, and really very, very intimate person by person, with outreach efforts to try and help those who are looking for help, enforcement efforts with those who are committing crimes, and a stay-away order is part of an enforcement effort. We have many stay-away orders against many people, and it is a tool that we actively use currently and will continue to use in the future.
Thank you.
Councilmember Winterer.
Well, since the chief is here, might as well ask her a few more questions. One of the other recommendations from the Recompense Commission was a nuisance abatement strategy for the 7-Eleven on Wilshire Boulevard near Reed Park. But what I've learned is that while that location, I guess the PD maintains sort of a top 20 list of the places in the city that routinely get the most calls for service, and it was pretty much every year for a number of years on the number one, that there's been some work done with the PD and the owners of the property to reduce those calls for service, and that location is now dropped off the top 20 list. Is that correct?
This is all true. The 7-Eleven at that location on Wilshire was indeed problematic. The police department spent a great amount of time working with the owners of the business, who took our advice on some different business practices. We also conducted enforcement activity at the area, and through really what we consider nuisance abatement techniques and tools, have taken that location from a high calls for service location that was in our top 20 consistently to a calls for service location that is having 18 calls in a 6-month period, whereas the McDonald's that we recently worked with at 2nd and Colorado had 90 calls in a month. So it is not on our top 20 location anymore, and the nuisance has been abated there. But memories run deep, which I understand. And a location that has been a problem location, it takes a bit of time for community members to see the change that has been wrought there. But our calls for service data do not show that 7-Eleven to be a problem location.
Great, thank you. And then they also suggested stationing a sworn officer at Reed Park and evaluating whether that had an impact on, particular metrics there. What do you think about that?
I think that police officers are expensive, and if the council's direction was to fulfill that request, it would necessitate me asking for additional FTE employees in order to meet that request. And to staff a police officer there 24/7, taking into account vacation days, holidays, etc., equates to about 4 FTE bodies per year just to have somebody stationed there full time. And I think that we can explore a myriad of other tools and techniques to get the same effect we're looking for that might be a little bit more fiscally palatable here in the city. I cannot support that level of staffing in one park with my current resources.
Well, speaking of that, maybe there's an opportune moment for you to edify the public about the great progress you've made bringing the department up to its pretty much now its full strength for sworn officers as was budgeted a number of years ago.
Yes, I am budgeted for 233 sworn officers. I currently sit at about 228, and I'm continuing to interview and hire. While I hear anecdotally as I move through the city, and even as I was in City Hall tonight, I was approached by a resident who said that in Ocean Park she sees more patrols, and her neighbors are talking about seeing more patrol officers on the street. But out of the number that I just talked about, 228, 20 of them are in training, all of these new hires. It's a very unique thing to law enforcement that the day I hire you, I have anywhere from 6 months to 12 months before I can deploy you in the field as a single officer unit and put you somewhere because of police academy training and because of field training. So while my numbers are increasing, I am not going to realize the full effect of that for about another 9 to 12 months. We do have officers in field training right now that are riding with field training officers, so you probably notice a lot of 2-officer cars driving around the city, and there are definitely more officers in the street. But this is a process for me to realize the full effect of my hiring because of the training cycle that is mandated by California Post and mandated by the profession.
So we're not quite at full strength yet, but backing up, when you first started here, you've made significant progress. I mean, you're at 228. What were you when you started off?
When I started here, we were, I think, at around 212 or a little bit less. So we're definitely heading in the right direction, and you can feel the energy, both in the police department and in the community. I think we have some great folks coming in to join this department, both lateral police officers and brand new hires that we put into police academies. So we're getting there, and as 2019 has shown, the year has started off good for crime as far as seeing some decreases in our numbers compared to this time last year. So our strategies are beginning to take effect, and your police department is going to work incredibly hard to make sure that they get a strong foothold in 2019.
Great. Thank you very much, Chief.
Councilmember Himmelrich?
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Wait, I got it. I got my button. So I have a question about a few of the suggestions, or I have 3 questions about 3 of the suggestions that have been made. One is that we put cameras in the parks. I wonder what you think about that.
So cameras in the parks are less expensive than human beings, but they're still expensive. Cameras in the parks also, you need to wrestle with whether or not you're going to monitor them full time, which right now we don't monitor cameras full time. Cameras in the park are great for after the fact to see what happened in an incident. If we, keeping in mind they're not DNA and they're not fingerprints and they don't tell us who the suspect is, we do have a picture of it, and it's great evidence if we can make the case later. With all of that said, cameras are clearly a good, tried and true and proven deterrent.
That was what I was going to ask you. So they are a tried and true deterrent. And the next thing I was going to ask you about is lighting, because as I was doing research in other places, it's also a proven deterrent that well-lit areas are less conducive to crime and than less well-lit areas. Isn't that right?
And these are researched ideas that are prevalent in CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, where you don't create dark corners to do dark deeds. So you don't have large trees, shrubs, fences that block areas from views. You keep areas well lit. You keep them open to public transport and foot traffic, and all of that does reduce crime.
So we have lighting, we have cameras, we have public safety officers.
Yes.
We have, and the equestrian patrols. Everybody loves the equestrian patrols. Good job.
Can I talk about that for a quick second?
I'd love to hear about that.
So we're making a move. This reorganization that I talked about with the April deployment, April 14th. Right now, the mounted unit is completely collateral, and we have we have about 9 officers, a couple of them that are still in training. But we have about 9 officers that can do this as a collateral function. In the April deployment, I'm gonna test for and take 2 officers and make it their full-time job to care for the horses and deploy in the field, and then allow the others to still be collateral assignment. The horses, it's a high visibility. They sit up higher. They see things that police officers can't see from the car or from the ground. They can maneuver in areas more quickly than other assets can. And so right now, they're working in the parks and the open spaces as they can on the weekends. But in April, there will be 2 officers that it will be their full-time job. So they will be very consistent in our parks and open spaces.
So, and are you taking volunteers for that group?
We just put out our memo looking for interested officers to apply, yes.
I think I'm a little old. And now what about panic buttons? And when they talk about panic buttons, I assume we're talking about the blue lights.
I was just shown a photo of that outside. So the blue light serves as a way to show people walking in a dark park that if you need immediate help, here is a button that you can push and get immediate help. So it's visual for them. That button should be pushed for a true serious felony crime, a rape, a robbery, a murder. The crimes that we are experiencing in our parks are very much lower level crimes, thank goodness. They're not that serious of a violent offense. And to have that type of panic button in a park does invite pranksters, does invite ease of access, and it could very quickly inundate our dispatch center with calls that should probably go to the non-emergency line. So based on the patterns of activity in the parks, I don't know that panic buttons are warranted, but I'd be happy to have future conversations about that. The first I heard of that was just now, so I'm just kind of talking off the cuff.
Well, and I'm familiar with it because on college campuses, and I have 2 kids who are now out, but they always had stations with blue lights where you could call if you needed help or an escort or some sort of thing, and they're very prevalent on college campuses, but they weren't panic buttons. They were actual telephones that went to,
and they were probably more used like in the later evening hours, I would assume.
Yes.
So keep in mind our parks are supposed to be closed at a certain time and nobody's supposed to be in them during those later evening hours, which includes everyone, residents, runners, joggers, dog walkers. So I think that the need for that type of blue light and that type of calling mechanism is during times of the evening when the park isn't supposed to be used anyway. So very useful on a college campus and in other places, definitely.
And are there areas other than, well, we can talk about this another time, but let me ask you one other thing. During the closed hours of the park, what are we doing to enforce the closure?
So that is left to the job of patrol officers who are patrolling the city and also responding to calls for service. I don't have dedicated sworn officers that their sole job is to go through the parks at 2 a.m. and check.
Thank you.
Councilmember Winterer.
So we just talked about park closures. It's also been suggested that, notwithstanding the challenges of getting a beach curfew through the Coastal Commission, which, is the governing body for that area, if that were to happen, what are your thoughts on the efficacy of a beach curfew as a tool for enhancing public safety?
That's an interesting question because some piers that I can think of, because the pier and the beach have a little bit of separate regulatory bodies that govern them. Some piers that I know of do close, but they have a physical structure that closes it. They have an arm that comes down at 10 p.m. at night and it's closed. We don't have, even if we create the regulation, we don't have the physical structure right now to efficiently close that off. But if it were to be closed, then it does give police officers it brings us to an area with a violation to check on and possibly enforce. And so I think that there would be benefit. There's benefit to these closures, even if there's not a physical infrastructure to support it. It is a little bit more labor intensive on the part of the police department to enforce it. But I think it's a conversation that could certainly be part of the solution here.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but as I think about this, do you know whether the data suggests that by closing the beaches for certain hours, we would reduce certain crimes and balancing that against the cost to enforce that curfew? maybe it's a subject to pursue a little bit further. But
I would have to look into that a little bit deeper to speak factually and look at the crime data and specifically the hours that the crime data is occurring. We do have crimes that occur there between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., but I can't quote for you the numbers right now.
I didn't really expect you could. I was going to be impressed if you could. All right, thank you.
I have a few questions, Chief. I'm sorry,
Yes.
but since you're there. So one of the things you mentioned is that the nature of the crimes in our parks, for the most part, is not the serious crimes that you mentioned. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that a little bit, because one of the things that I hear, and it's, I think it's one bad thing happens and 45 people say it and it turns into 45 bad things happening, is give us some idea about the nature of the crime that you're currently seeing in our parks and on the beach.
Yes, I can. So in the last 6 months, the 5 parks that we've been talking about, Pal Park, Reed, Tongva, Memorial, and Virginia, in the last 6 months, we had 7 Part 1 crimes occur in those 5 parks in total. Pal Park, we had 1 aggravated assault and 1 robbery. In Reed Park, 1 larceny, which is a theft. In Tongva Park, 1 robbery and 2 larcenies. In Memorial Park, 1 burglary. And in Virginia Park, no crimes. So a 6-month period, 7 crimes spread out really over 4 parks. Those are the serious crimes. The other thing that I think should be noted is in looking at the amount of public safety officer time and police officer time spent in the park and the number of calls for service, 90% is officer initiated. 10% is citizens calling in. So we are extremely active in the parks. And I think that 90% of officer-initiated time really speaks to the work that we're doing and the presence that we have.
And I'm not sure, this may be a question for Ms. Noble and you, or maybe you both can answer it, but in talking to people about this issue, one of the impressions I get, and again, it's purely anecdotal, is that there's a bit of a conflagration between crime and discomfort. And by that I mean that people are uncomfortable with some of what they're seeing in the parks, and some of it is not appropriate activity in the park, but they're not they're not crime victims, and people may not be committing crimes, but it's sort of a discomfort issue as opposed to a crime issue. And I wonder if either you or Ms. Noble could comment on that.
I think what you say is true. I also understand the discomfort issue. Today, Captain Jacob and I visited all 5 of the parks that we're talking about. I wanted to make sure it was fresh in my mind. And we went to Reed Park, and we saw the mix of different groups of people there in the park. I also saw 2 of my PSOs walking the park and being present, going back and forth between the playground, the tennis courts, and the lawn area. So I understand the discomfort that does not cross into criminal. And even though my job is handcuff related, law enforcement related, there is great power in having our public safety officers as a presence in the park to mitigate as best as possible that feeling of discomfort when there are no criminal acts taking place, but there are multitudes of people from different groups looking to enjoy the same space.
And let me ask a further question, because we have seen, and unfortunately some of us have seen, videos of people doing inappropriate things, sexual acts, things like that in the park, which are, I believe, crimes. But can you describe a little bit the process of how one goes about? I mean, do you need to catch the person in the act, or if you just have a video of someone and there's no name attached? I mean, can you sort of describe those challenges?
I hate describing those challenges because this is a part where I sound defensive, and I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. I don't mean to. The police department owns this problem, and we own these criminal acts. Unfortunately, the masturbation, the urinating in public, they're misdemeanors. And the law reads that a misdemeanor not committed in my presence, I cannot enforce. If a resident calls me and then says, here's a picture of the person that was masturbating, or they send me a video of it, I can't get a warrant and go out and arrest this person later, because the misdemeanors have to be committed in my presence. I have to have a citizen who signs a private person's arrest, and then I take possession of the offender from that point on. Even with that said, the other piece that is very untenable is I'll speak as a parent. I think it should be a felony for a person to masturbate in front of my child. But it's not. It's a misdemeanor, and the punishment for a misdemeanor is a citation that's given to the person. So even if the police officer was standing in the park and saw that person, if they don't have warrants, if there's nothing else going on, where the law is not such that we're going to remove that person from the park for the next 20 years. It's a misdemeanor crime. So when the urinating in public, all these terrible things that we've seen the pictures and the videos of, unfortunately, we have to physically be right there when it happens. We have to have a citizen willing to sign a private person's arrest. And if there are no other mitigating circumstances, it's a misdemeanor crime, which is a ticket issued to the offender. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is we are there when it happens. We do stop the person. We do take action to the fullest extent of the law. And there is a mechanism by which we can remove them from the park at that point in time, or the open space, or anywhere where that's occurring.
All right, thank you. I think that's the end of our questions.
I just
I'm
want to
sorry.
follow up. Sorry, that private person's arrest, is that visible to the to everyone to see who you are and where you live, for example?
So where it becomes visible is through the court process, because the citizen would get subpoenaed by the judge to come in and testify at the trial. And that's where we tend to lose a lot of our residents who, I understand, they say, hey, I've got a job. I can't take a day off work and go to court and see this through to fruition. It does not have to be public. The citizen can sign the private person's arrest, point the person out to us, give us that form, and then we take possession of the offender from that point on.
All right, thank you very much. We
Thank
appreciate your time. All right, we're going to begin the public hearing. I'm going to call out a few names, and we hope that people will line up against the wall to my right. First, we'll have John C. Smith, who will be speaking on behalf of the Rec and Parks Commission for 5 minutes. Then Denise Barton, Marianne LaGuardia, Lori Brown.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Cole. I just first want to say, my name is John C. Smith. I'm the chair of the Recreation and Parks Commission. And, Chief Renault came to our commission back in, I believe it was August, and, she's doing a fantastic job. And she mentioned back then all the hiring that she was trying to do, and that she was trying to reorganize things. And, everybody in the room, in the city, supports her. She's done a really nice job. Back a couple months ago, we were talking about the Park and Recreation Master Plan, our 20-year plan. We're redoing it because it's 20 years old. And there was a slide up at the seminar, and it said that 84% of people surveyed were concerned about park safety. And that just shocked me. And I live near Reed Park. There's been a homeless feed there for about 10 years, at least. A group stopped about a year ago, and then another group came and filled the void. Thank you, Council. You guys have tried very hard to do things to address homelessness, and you've done it in a compassionate way. And I support it. Our commission supports it. We should always be a compassionate city. We've worked with you. Park activation, I remember back in November, then Councilwoman and now Mayor Davis said, activate those parks. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we went there with Reed. Activation, we were all in. 3-4 years ago, we helped redesign that quadrant of Reed Park. We said, yes, let's put a little path around it so people can walk. Let's put exercise equipment there. Let's put more lighting in there. We were all in. Some of our staff members, Director Ginsburg, Daniel Noble, they've worked really hard. Meet Me at Reed was a great idea. And you know what? There's been a couple events there The events there were wildly successful. When there's something going on in that park, nothing happens. Nothing bad happens. People come to me, and just like they've come to you over time, and they've asked you 3 words. Can you help? And I, as a commissioner, I always say, yes, I can. And when it came to park safety and homelessness and its impact on parks, I tried to take another step further, saying, yes, I will. I know what the chief has done. I've seen the PSOs. Park rangers are romanticized. The PSO and a park ranger are the same thing. We don't need park rangers. The commission suggested dedicated police patrols. They can come from the help team. They can come from anywhere, because when there are police officers in the parks, people come to the parks. The commission mentioned park closures and beach closures. I know there's problems with some of those things. But I also know that when a police presence is in the parks, people feel more safe coming to the parks. And if you walk by Reed, Sunday 1 p.m., kids don't go to Reed Park. Their parents don't take them to Reed Park. Our commission suggested a couple things. We should try to meet with the people that run that feed at Reed Park and give them another place to feed people, a place that's closer to services. I mean, they used to feed homeless people, the homeless, out in City Hall. I know a group moved off the promenade recently towards the Salvation Army. I don't know how successful that's been, but Kathleen Rawson, who runs Downtown Santa Monica Inc., she said she worked for years for that. But when something's happening for 10 years and it draws a lot of people, Reed Park should not be a day camp for the homeless. And, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals says, listen, it's cruel and unusual punishment to not allow people to sleep in a park if you don't give them a place to sleep. Why don't we establish day beds at TPC, the People's Concern? Why don't we give people that want to sleep in Reed Park all day long a place to sleep, and drive them over there? Then more people will come to the park and activate it. When it comes to park activation, we've worked really hard, and so has the staff. But, you go past there on a Saturday afternoon, and, I'll send you guys some photos. And I apologize that I sent my list so far, but I wanted to speak on behalf of the commission, and our commission only recommended a certain number of things. And I thought I want to give the council a lot more opportunities. Anyways, thank you very much. I think that when the things you try to do are not that successful, it's time to try other things. And that's why we're here tonight. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Denise Barton?
Good evening. I'm sorry I believe we gave some of this presentation mistakenly the last item when it was meant for this item. Again, I must say you talk a good game. Just like with the scooters, you can put in place as many restrictions as you want to. Although if there's no enforcement, like with the scooters, it really means nothing, as are many of the claims that have been made in the staff presentation. Making it just something for you to brag you did or another photo op or fake award. Isn't one coming for well-being soon? Can anyone else relate to the expressions about the city of Santa Monica dirty, unsafe, and overcrowded living downtown? I can relate to all these expressions. But to this city, it's not the residents that count, but the homeless people, which can be seen by the over $2.5 million cost to the residents that now have to take care of them. And here's the real question: it has to be, does this not bring more homeless here at a bigger cost to the residents? All to present an untrue image of the city. So another thing is that with your Breeze bike share program, if you just continue throwing money at something that's not worked in the past and that you're losing sales on now, then you should. It doesn't work that way in business. So you should probably try something different. And in addition to controlling the crowds better in the parks and on the beaches, and like I said, stop overdeveloping and overcrowding the city. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to call out a few more names. We have Mary Ann LaGuardia and Lori Brown, and then Marcy Kaplan and Carolyn Stroh.
Good evening. I want to deal with just one issue, which is the chicken and egg problem. We all know that activating the parks helps, but you can't activate the parks if people are afraid to go to them or if they're disgusted to go to them. And so unless you have a program, the parks aren't being activated as well as they should. And in particular, I'm talking about Reed Park, which is the current one under discussion. While I agree with Chief Renata on everything she said, including how expensive it would be to station a uniformed officer in Reed Park, I support a proposal that would try that for a brief period of time. One of the disadvantages of having been on every youth athletic club, whatever, board for 30 years is there isn't anyone left in Santa Monica who doesn't have my phone number and doesn't feel free to use it. So I talk to a lot of people. And when I go back to them with the city is gathering data, they use the old line, what do you want us to do? Believe what you tell us or believe what we see? People are seeing things in the park they don't want to see, what the chief referred to as uncomfortable stuff. And whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony doesn't make the person who saw it feel any better that they happen to be there or any more anxious to go to the park. I think if we're gathering data, the best data we can gather is to have a limited period, I don't know whether it needs to be 24/7, of a sworn officer visible in a park for who knows how long, a month, 2 months, optimally 3 months, and let that officer or those officers, since it won't be the same officer all the time, come back and say, well, the bike gang isn't there now that I'm there every day. Or the drug deals that go on diagonally across from St. Monica's aren't necessarily happening. Or the people in the parks aren't masturbating in front of the children because they see a uniformed police officer. Please think about that one. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Brown?
Lori Brown, Vice Chair of the Recreation and Park Commission, and I've been on the commission for 6 years, and I appreciate the fact that you gave me that task. We came here before you a few months ago saying to you that we worked every angle that we could possibly do. We worked with city staff, we worked with the police, we worked with the community, and that we needed some help. You came to us and you said, go back and see what you could do. I thank you very much for looking at some of the things that was on that list, but what came out of the last meeting was that our community doesn't feel safe. They're carrying mace, they're uncomfortable, they're not visiting the parks, and they're posting, as you know, what they see. We came to a conclusion after hearing from the public that what they wanted was a 90-day test in Reed Park to see if having a police officer there for 90 days, at the end, we could look at the data and see if it made a difference. Tonight I heard from our chief, who we all have great confidence in and is doing an amazing job, but I did hear her say tonight that if she's there, she's making a difference. And I think that's true. Our little kids had said to us, please just give us a policeman. It's not a PSO officer. It's a policeman, so that they can see what's really going on in the parks and give you back that data that you're looking for. Not the data that you see, the data that will be collected from somebody being there for 90 days. When we originally proposed it for 30, they were not happy. When we said, what about if we did a test for 90 days? We got a standing ovation. We had people of all ages come out and talk about crime. And I want to differentiate tonight the difference between homelessness and crime. We are not talking about homelessness. We are talking about crime. And our homeless people have also suffered of the criminals that are congregating in the park.
Thank you. Ms. Kaplan?
Hi, thank you, council members, for discussing this tonight and for the city staff for all the work that you've been doing. My name is Marcy Kaplan. I'm a Recs and Parks Commissioner. I'm also a mom of 2 small kids in Santa Monica. I just want to touch a little bit on the park activation that was discussed tonight and urge you to explore putting additional funding in there or incentivizing community members to do more park activations. I just I just started to be the liaison to the Virginia Avenue Park Advisory Board this month, and it was inspiring to see the work that's done in the community there, the steering committee that's there, and the staff that's committed. And maybe there's an opportunity to do something like that in Reed Park, to really invest some funds in additional programming, because like someone else had brought up, those Meet Me at Reed events last summer were really amazing. It was amazing for the community to be there and to engage in, and people aren't going to the park because other people aren't going to the park. And so the more we can do events like that, and I mean, people don't even want to have birthday parties in the grassy side of Reed Park because it is uncomfortable. And I think ways that we can encourage and invest more funding in park activation will really start to encourage people to go more into the other areas of the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaplan. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Kaplan, Councilmember Himmelrich has a question.
Hi, so I do have a question. So you're now on the committee for Virginia Avenue Park, where they say there were no arrests, right? And I'd like to know if, and I know you're new to this, whether you have an opinion as to why Virginia Avenue Park has no arrests and why Reed Park is such a problem.
I don't know the entire history with Virginia Avenue Park, but I do know that there is a committed staff person there, and there's also
There's a what? I'm sorry, there is
a committed staff person that's there working with the advisory board. They also have a close relationship with their local police officer that they've worked with. And I know that there is a long history in that park that maybe staff can discuss more, but I think there's a very committed advisory board that they're planning events every other month. There's the library there's after school programs. It's a very invested community, and I think that there's various things that draw community members to that park to engage, and I think there's probably been a lot of work with local law enforcement in that area as well.
Thank you.
All right, Carolyn, is it Stroh? Stroh.
I'm a recent resident of Santa Monica for the past 6 years. And in those 6 years, I have seen everything go downhill. And I'm very upset. It's a beautiful city by the sea, but it's going down the tubes rapidly. The public safety and the health is being taken down with Santa Monica. It's very difficult to walk on the sidewalks with all the scooters. They go so fast, they're quiet. When I first moved here, I only had to deal with the skateboards, and you could hear them coming at you. They would say right or left. They had the courtesy to let you know which side they're going to pass. Now the scooters come on both sides of you, and like sometimes I have to use a cane when I walk. It's ridiculous. And it's only going to get worse once the tourists come in here. And I see two at a time. I see them on the promenade. Tonight, walking here, because I'm in walking distance, they were on the sidewalk in the promenade. And I said to them, you're a bunch of idiots. You shouldn't be in the promenade. At least be in the main roadway. Don't be on a sidewalk.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're talking about park safety now.
Okay. I have to deal with this if I want to walk down to any park. I have to go through all of this. And to get to the park or the beach, it's difficult when you're 72. The city used to take care of the old people and make it safe for everybody. And there's just too much liberalness with let's try this, let's try that, and then you don't take it away when you get the complaints from the people that are struggling with this. And as long as I have you here, marijuana was the wrong thing to do.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. You can only talk on the item that's before us. Currently, park safety is, but your time is up anyway. Thank you. All right, that concludes the public hearing. The matters before the council. All right, well, I'll jump in since nobody else did. Mr. Shin, one of the things we heard about was the service of meals to the homeless in our parks. And I'm wondering if you could address both the legal constraints on our ability to control that, and maybe staff can address some of the steps that we've taken to try and control that within the legal framework as well.
Sure. The city has had a long history of managing food distributions in both public parks, in the public sidewalks, and the council in the past has made various decisions within the constraints of the law, and one of them is the First Amendment, which requires that local governments or any government respect First Amendment activities that are expressive. And expressive activities, it does not necessarily need to be spoken. Acts could be considered expressive, and the council has made a balancing of distribution activities by limiting them in certain locations where there are compelling government interests to do so. For example, the council adopted Santa Monica Municipal Code 5.06020, which limited or precludes distribution on sidewalks because those sidewalks are meant for public travel and access, and significant amount of congregation limits access, particularly ADA access. And so the council can make governmental decisions to place certain activities at certain places while being limited by the First Amendment.
All right, and Ms. Noble, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the work we've done to try and address that particular issue.
Well, there were a number of food providers operating in public spaces, the promenade, city parks, for a number of years, and over time we have moved some of them inside to the access center that's operated by the people concerned, and most recently the council invested in capital improvements at the Salvation Army, which allowed a long-standing group that was on the promenade to move inside. We are now looking towards the new state law to provide us with a new path. That law is really within the purview of the county Department of Public Health. They have environmental health inspectors who are charged with informing people about the law. There's actually a fact sheet on the Department of Public Health's website that lets people know that there are now limits to the types of food that can be distributed. There's now a permitting process. There's a fee that must be collected. And I do know that the Department of Public Health has been in contact with some groups that are still outside in our parks and have let them know about the new state law.
All right, thank you. Councilmember McEwen.
There wasn't a whole lot tonight that was brand new, but there were a couple of new wrinkles and suggestions that I want to explore a bit with questions with staff. Apparently, the provision of hospitality people in some of our parks has been resoundingly successful in changing the tone of what goes on in those parks. We're hearing from the commission that they'd like to have a pilot program, or at least some of the commission members, a pilot program of sworn police officers in a certain park. Do we have any reason to believe that a sworn officer is necessary? If we've seen hospitality people be effective in other parks, could a first step be to assign non-sworn people in that same kind of hospitality role, not paid for necessarily by a bid, because there's no bid that's adjacent to Reed Park, but rather than take on the rather extensive expense the chief mentioned of 4 full-time sworn officers to cover a park 24/7, have we thought about using some non-sworn presence that would be less expensive but perhaps just as effective?
So if you're talking about the ambassadors that are in Palisades and Tongva Park and expanding those to other parks, I can speak to that.
If we established Reed ambassadors,
right,
just hypothetically, funded by the city for the moment.
Yes. So city staff have had this discussion with Downtown Santa Monica, Inc. We had this conversation with them about 2 years or so ago, talking specifically about Reed, and we've been in contact with them recently. And when we talked about it in 2017, DTSM provided us with their management philosophy, which is to have a certain level of staffing in the park at all times when the bathrooms are open. And when we costed that out about 2 years or so ago, we were looking at a cost of over $500,000 for ambassador services at Reed Park. If the council gives us that direction, we would go back to GTSM and continue the conversation and understand what the costs are now, and talk to them about the kind of staffing model that would be appropriate.
Well, at first I was talking about a limited length pilot, so the $500,000 might be more than that would take, but now let me take it to another level. A company called the Core Group is about to open a proper hotel at 7th and Wilshire. I would imagine they're going to have quite an interest in that park adjacent to their hotel being a welcoming place, or at least not a frightening place. Have we had discussions with the Core Group about their being willing perhaps to help us with the issues in that park? Whether it's through activation, patrols, or some whatever.
Mm-hmm. City staff have not, from the Community and Cultural Services Department, have not had conversations with the Core Group. I believe that downtown Santa Monica staff have had conversations, and some community members have reached out to the hotel and broached that conversation.
Well, that's something I would hope will continue to be pursued, because it seems like that would be a way that the taxpayers wouldn't have to pay for that particular service. Let me ask you a bit about the beaches. It's only in the last couple of days we got some notices from staff about exploring what it would actually take to close the beaches. And it's complicated because the Coastal Commission's involved, it's a state beach. Do we have reason to believe that would be effective in addressing the issues that people are talking about? Because I haven't really heard that much from the public about the beach. I know that people do sleep on the beach. I know that there are homeowners adjacent to the beach who are concerned about the people sleeping there. But have we seen the same sorts of problems that we see in Reed Park, for instance, with the beach at 2 to 4 in the morning? I know it's almost impossible to patrol.
Yes, we have seen problems on the beach during the late hours and during the very early morning hours that are criminal in nature. If you think about the beach and the pier in this way, think of it as a whole swath of real estate that during those evening hours, because it's on the sand, because you have to have, my police car won't go on the sand, right. I have to have a beach truck. What we have down there is an environment that is accessible and inviting, and it's not being policed consistently. So what is being allowed to happen is an environment for people that then become victims. And in order to protect them from becoming victims, there are a variety of tools that we can impose, and one of them certainly could be regulations so that we get rid of the environment in totality so that we protect the people in that way.
So here's a question that people don't usually ask. If we were to close the beach, where would that criminal activity go?
So I can't begin to speculate on that, but it's almost the same conversation about staffing Reed Park with an officer 24/7 or $500,000 for Reed Park ambassadors. I think you would have to ask yourself, then where would that problem go? It's certainly a question to be had, but I do think that if speaking about the beach and the pier, that a lot of those are kind of opportunistic crimes and opportunistic violent crimes, and if the opportunity isn't there, then the crime won't be there.
But if those opportunistic individuals simply migrated, say, to a dark alley in a residential neighborhood, we'd have more residents at greater risk of the side effects of the activity. But that would be easier for you to patrol because you can go up and down alleys.
And I can't speak to what that could or what it could increase in the city, but I can tell you for sure that I've got police officers in black and whites that can actually access those areas that are routinely patrolling them during patrol shifts.
So part of the difference would be you would be able to patrol and control far better than you can on the beach at 2 in the morning on the sand. I'll end with, I have to ask a lighter question. I love the mounted police patrols. I think they've been hugely effective. The residents love seeing them. As a bicyclist, I ride past our parks quite often, and I can tell when the mounted patrols have been in the area because there are side impacts that occur, particularly in bike lanes. Have we thought about getting low-emission horses?
Yes, so two things.
It's compost. It's good.
It is the policy of our mounted to stop and dismount and collect with the exception of the bike lanes because it's dangerous for them because they're in traffic. We're looking at how we can modify that to pay attention to the traffic so that they can clean that up. But low-emission horses are possible. It depends on what you feed them. And depending on what you feed them, it dries up and blows away. Keeping in mind that this is the circle of life. And I can tell you the best vegetable gardens I've ever had have been from that composted manure.
And as for what I've seen in the bike lanes, I know it happens.
Sorry about that.
Councilmember Himmelrich.
Hi again, Chief. And my next question is a follow-on to what I asked Ms. Copeland. Did I get that right? Whatever. I forgive me for that, but that I forget your last name. But Virginia Avenue Park had no crime.
Right.
Or no reported arrests, right? Whereas every other park did. Is there some difference between Virginia Avenue Park and these other parks, or is there some different deployment, or is there something else that we can do there?
So there is certainly a lot going on at Virginia Avenue Park with the library, with the community rooms that are used for different events at various times throughout the day, and with the staff that's there. But I have to tell you honestly, one thing that I notice when I look at Powell Park, Reed Park, and Virginia Avenue Park is Virginia Avenue Park has topography. It has slight little hills. It has trees. Reed Park is a flat space of lawn that is very inviting to take a nap in the beautiful sunshine of Santa Monica, which is what I saw when I was there today. Powell Park has the same grass, flat environment that invites long-term sitting, lying, sleeping. Virginia Avenue Park, it's a little bit, there's gardens, there are flower beds on the corners, there's a little bit of hills in the grass. The topography itself is different.
So the other thing I've noticed when I go to Virginia Avenue Park, and I go there in the day and I go there in the evening, is that there are more people all over it.
Yeah, and it's also, because of the way it sits in the neighborhood, I think it's a cut-through for people that might live on one side of the park or the other. Instead of walking around the park to get to the store or their home, they walk right through the park because it's set up that way. So it's just, whereas Pacific Palisades is bordered by the bluff on one side, Reed Park doesn't really have that much of that situation, but Virginia Avenue Park is very inviting as a cut-through.
So if we had a path, for instance, cutting right through the middle or crisscrossing across Reed Park, that might change the topography? Is that something
it would create less space for people to sit, lie, and sleep on that lawn. But, I mean, I don't want to get out of my lane and get into CCS's lane. But
okay, well, I'm happy to hear from anyone about the issue and why Virginia Avenue Park has 0 and Reed Park has more.
Well, before we get that, because there's this real misapprehension, the police, it's not like Reed Park had 100 and Virginia Avenue Park had 0. It was a difference between 1 and 0 and 2 and 0. Is that
correct? And at Reed Park, one of the crimes involved the victim and the suspect were both homeless.
So it's not as if there's a dramatic difference between Virginia Avenue Park and Reed Park. We're talking about 1 versus no Part 1 crimes, right?
Yeah, in a 6-month period, Part 1 crimes for 5 parks. There were 7 Part 1 crimes in a 6-month period. I think most of our residential streets would be really happy to have that. But I also don't want to say that and make it sound like I am negating some of these quality of life concerns as well. So I can tell you my Part 1 crime statistics, but I don't want it to detract from my understanding of the quality of life situation in the parks as well.
No, I understand, and thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Councilmember Himmelrich.
Well, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Hara.
So maybe since nobody else has answered that question, I can go ahead and try to give you a little bit. I do believe that somebody from the parks actually told you that the community at Virginia Avenue Park is very involved and they have a strong relationship with the police department. And also, the community actually engages in a lot of other stuff. There is a lot of engagement at the park. There are a lot of programs where people come together and they try to do things. But here is one thing that really caught my attention, and that was that that homeless are also being affected by some of the things that are happening over at Reed Park. Now that really caught my attention, because that means that a lot of these things that might be happening there are not related with our homeless population. So I'm really interested in knowing about that issue more than anything else. Maybe if you can, I know that you said that there were 7 crimes that were committed over at Reed Park. So overall, within the last
Part 1 crimes. Part 1
and
crimes.
one at Reed Park. It's 2 at Pell Park, 1 at Reed Park, and it was a theft, a larceny at Reed.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Councilmember Wintour.
Well, so this is a study session, but we're also asked to give staff some direction on things to bring back during our budget process. So I thought I might make a stab, if that's okay with the mayor, and take us in that direction. Well, one thing I found interesting in the report is the report on calls for service of the police department, and we heard a lot of it tonight in the testimony. Is that Reed Park, of all the parks, has the most calls for service, I noted, but it's also actually smaller than a lot of the other parks. So it seems to me that whatever we do in the way of budget decisions, we probably want to try and pilot some strategies at Reed Park and see what sort of outcomes we get out of those. So I would like to make a motion that, first of all, that we ask staff to come back, and this seems to me a no-brainer, with funding strategies to continue the hamster and C3 teams for homeless outreach and treatment, because some of that money's going away, and I don't think we want to give up on those programs. And the second part of the motion would be direct staff to come back with some proposals in the budget process for CIP improvements to our parks, and particularly for Reed Park in terms of lighting and cameras and other security enhancements we can do with that sort of hardware, and to come back with an estimated cost of a pilot program, as Councilmember McEwen suggested, for however long, both for using some sort of ambassador type service there for short period of time to see how that works. And I think we heard from the public they'd like to see us come back with more of an idea what the cost of actually putting a sworn officer in there. I don't see really the need to put a sworn officer in there 24/7, but at least have that idea, and so we can evaluate the difference between having a sworn officer and the ambassadors and make some decisions there. So that may be my motion for that direction to staff.
I'll second for discussion, and I want to add a few concepts to that. Staff had already asked us to consider as a council for the budget process increased hospitality funding, and I think we should do that for especially the pilot idea at Reed Park, which I think that's the first step before we deploy fully sworn officers at much more expense.
Well, that was part of my motion.
But what I wanted to add to that was I hope that we will approach the core group who is about to open that hotel, and any other nearby entities we can think of who would benefit from the advantages in that park, and see if we can't get some help with the funding.
I think that is an excellent idea and very friendly.
Okay. I also think, having heard from the chief about what she perceives as a serious advantage to our pursuing the idea of a beach curfew, as much as I'm a strong advocate of the beach in California belonging to the people and being open at all times, there have been circumstances where certain beaches have been allowed to be closed for public safety reasons. So I'd like to add not a direction to close the beach at this point, but a direction for staff to investigate and evaluate so that can come back to us as a possible future policy decision for the council.
Yes, I think we should get through tomorrow's hearing with the Coastal Commission first, but but that is friendly.
I think we'll get through that before staff's able to come up with something that has to do with closing the beach. And then I think that it's obvious that a true success has been found through park activation where we've been able to do it. And there have been some suggestions made tonight that the council and the city could make resources available to really encourage people, not just with city programs, but with neighborhood-initiated programs to activate the parks. And I would hope that our direction to staff would be to pursue that as well.
In terms of funding in the budget, or just internally?
There'll probably be some funding required just to make resources available.
Or some sort of startup toolkit or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't be that we would be funding the activities necessarily, but between the synergy of having the ambassadors in a park like Reed, getting more trainers in the park at Reed, and encouraging the people in that neighborhood, which is a highly dense multifamily neighborhood, much in need of that open space, to use the open space that is there for them, I think we could really turn Reed around. So I want to use all those tools.
All right. I mean, we did discuss at one point the idea of maybe a reduced permit fee if you wanted to have a larger function, for instance.
That would be encouraging the trainers. Of course, we do have to be careful.
Well, not for the trainers, but for the parties. If you want to activate a park with 152 people, because the city manager said we wouldn't prosecute for 151, but he didn't go up to 152.
He didn't go to 152. Yeah. We're throwing a lot of stuff to staff as direction, but it's clear from the fact that we've been at this for 3 separate meetings and that the Rec and Parks Commission continues to address us on the issue, and that we hear as much as we do from the public about this, that we do have to, as a council, direct staff to try multiple things, and we'll find out which ones work, and hopefully we'll find out which ones are much more financially effective, because as we know, we have budget challenges. We can't just throw money at this problem, but we do have to address it.
All right. Were you next in line, Councilmember Winterer?
No, that's when making the motion.
I think the city manager wanted to jump in.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I too, and speak on behalf of the entire staff, take seriously these concerns and want to continue what I think has been not only a robust discussion, but we've already deployed a lot of these strategies in the time we've been talking about them, and we're already seeing some results. And I think when you take a look particularly at Reed Park, which is the park closest to my neighborhood and across the street from the church I go to, so I'm there a lot. We're not talking about Reed Park. We're talking about 1 acre of a 5-acre park. We're talking about the flat part. I see people playing basketball there all day and into the evening. I see people at the tot lot. I see people playing tennis. I see people going to the Miles Playhouse when there are activities. Really the concern is the bathroom and the flat part, which is less than 1 acre. We have 134 acres of park in the city, not counting 3 miles of beach. We have 5,400 acres in this city. And if we start assigning police officers to 1 acre, I don't care what it is, Montana Avenue, City Hall, a particular park, we are well down a very slippery slope, not just of expense, but of tying the hands of our police department to respond to crime. So I would appeal to the council to let us propose in the budget process a more open-ended set of recommendations, because I really think that once we start down the path of a group of people saying we should have a police officer on our corner, we will never hear the end of that. There will be a police officer, everyone will want a police officer on their corner. And if 1 crime in 6 months gets you a police officer on your corner, there are going to be a lot of police officers on a lot of corners in this city.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem O'Day.
I support this motion. Thank you for articulating it. I wanted to offer 2 additional ideas. One, this notion of having grants to neighborhood groups. This evening we had a celebration of the micro grants that were handed out to community members, and maybe that provides us with some model that we could use for activating the parks. I thought that could be a low cost and high community engagement type of a model. So just a little bit of a nuance on top of, I think, what was already in that motion. And 2, getting some kind of report back as to what I think might have the biggest impact of all that we heard tonight, which is these 20 additional officers who are currently in training and about to come on duty, and I'd like to just know when that happens and make sure that we're getting good reports on that so that we are triggered to watch for the impacts in the community when it occurs. So I'll support the motion.
Councilmember Himmelrich?
Yeah, I too support the motion, but there are a couple things that I would like to understand the cost of, and those are the two factors that the chief said are definite deterrents. And one is lighting and how much it would cost to, I understand some lighting has been put in, but to make these parks even more lit and more open to public view, because it sounds like that's the real issue, how much of it you can see and how much of it you can't, whether there are dark corners, for instance. So that's one. And the other is cameras, which I know the chief said are expensive, but are a proven effective deterrent, and probably a lot cheaper than personnel.
So, Councilmember, my motion included the request that staff come back in the budget process with data on the costs of the lights and the cameras and other security enhancements to the parks, and particularly Reed Park.
Thank you.
I wrote it down, so he's right.
I missed it. Okay.
And if I'm still the queue, so I want to clarify that for Councilmember Himmelrich, and I want to respond to the city manager's concerns. My motion was that the staff would come back with, a harder analysis of the cost of a pilot program of the ambassadors in Reed Park and of providing some sort of sworn police presence. I suspect that the costs for that sworn police presence and the trade-offs that have to be made in terms of public safety elsewhere in the city will be a deterrent to go in that direction. But I just prefer to make those sort of decisions based on hard data rather than speculation.
Councilmember Himmelrich, were you still in the queue? Okay, no, that's fine. Just didn't want to remove you. All right. Well, seeing no one else, I'm just going to make a couple of comments. And I'll be supporting the motion because I do understand it not to be direction to go forth and do all these things, but to be direction to explore these and what the cost might be, so that staff maybe can come back with some recommendations and say, here's where we get the most bang for the buck. But because people asked about what would be the cost of a sworn officer or whatever, we can compare those two. The other thing I want to mention is that I know that we're not talking about homelessness tonight, but in my mind, when I hear people talk about safety in the park, a lot of what they're talking about are activities being done by homeless persons. And, while we're not, again, looking for solutions to that tonight, we have wonderful people who are on a daily basis trying to come up with innovative solutions. I think it's just important to remember that that the two are interlinked to some extent, and that I know staff is working collectively on both those issues. And I think if the people who are concerned about safety in the parks also then need to support the programs that we're putting forth to ameliorate the problem of persons experiencing homelessness. Too often I hear people say, well, I don't want the homeless people there, take them away, lock them up. We can't do that legally, or I guess the city attorney will tell me if I'm wrong about that, but we can't do that legally. Homelessness is not a crime, but I think there's a sense that somehow public safety and homelessness are two different things. And I would hope that everybody who cares about the safety in any of our parks understands that maybe one of the most effective things we can do is to change that, what we call discomfort about what's going on in the park, is help people who are experiencing homelessness get homes, because then they won't have to sleep in our parks or do whatever it is they're doing in our parks that make people uncomfortable. So I just wanted to sort of give that pitch for, it's a good cross-pollination opportunity here, and I hope everyone who cares about this issue will express the same level of concern about solving the issue of people experiencing homelessness. Mr. Cole, are you back in the queue?
I just wanted to put on the record that I appreciate very much Councilmember Winter's clarification, and as I indicated, I'm very comfortable with that approach. I think that's a wise and prudent one. And I also want to clarify, there is now, and there will continue to be, increased uniformed police presence in Reed Park, supplemented as well by public safety officers who are assigned particular hours to patrol Reed Park, as well as the activation strategy. So I don't, in saying that in resisting the idea that we would assign a police officer to a particular location for 24 hours a day or even 12 hours a day, and the implications of that. I'm not at all suggesting that Reed Park does not deserve and is not already getting and should not potentially get more uniformed police presence. It is a deterrent. It is an important deterrent, and the Parks and Recreation Commission is right to articulate that deterrent. But I think there is a very dangerous precedent, as I've articulated, in nailing down a police officer instead of allowing our police department to assign police officers where they make the most sense, because that changes day to day. And wasting an officer, in a place where there isn't a need for them, when there's a need 2 blocks away, that's where I would be concerned. But we'll bring back the data on what it would cost to do that, and the council ultimately is the decision maker on this, of course, as always.
Councilmember Hara?
Thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to figure out what could we add on here in addition to what you already have. To come up with, one of the suggestions was to figure out a place where they can go and sleep. I know that we don't have many places where that could happen, but could we think about potentially coming back with some ideas as to where we could do that? Because I hear loud and clear that removing them from one place is not enough, right? I mean, because they will go, somewhere else, and we have to be realistic. Santa Monica is the place to be at, and that's why we are all here, right? So I want to see if we can look at something that we could do to improve that, because definitely having one police officer is exceedingly expensive, but maybe instead of spending the money in one police officer, not that I want to take any of them away, but could we invest some of those funds in a place where we can go ahead and shelter them or give them a place to sleep at?
So might I suggest that we take up that question at your next council meeting, when Elisa Orduña will be bringing you the city's annual report on homelessness, which will allow you to see the comprehensive homeless continuum of care.
Thank you.
Sounds like a winner. Great. Councilmember McEwen.
But with particular connection to part of tonight's motion, I hope that if we look at the idea of closing Santa Monica Beach at night, we acknowledge the fact that there are at least 50, maybe 100, maybe more people who are now sleeping on the sand at that beach. And if they end up in people's carports in our residential neighborhood, I don't think that most residents of the city will feel we've done a good thing. So if indeed we are to investigate closing the beach, along with that investigation, let us take seriously investigating where those people could go for a safe night's sleep.
Councilmember Winterer.
Well, so Ms. Noble just made me want to ask a question. It's a terrible thing she's done. So the staff report said that we're coming back with the homelessness update study session on April 30th, but you just mentioned it's our next meeting.
Right. I did notice that as I was preparing for this evening. So you have an opportunity at the end of April to look at all of the city's budget proposals, including those that will be presented to support your new framework priorities. We regularly bring to council a report on our homeless service delivery system and strategies to address homelessness, and that report is coming to you at your March 26th meeting. So you have tonight's conversation, you have a report just about strategies to address homelessness that have been implemented over the past about 18 months or so, and what's going forward at your March 26th meeting. And then on April 30th, you will receive the city's entire package of budget proposals that relate to your framework priorities, and reducing homelessness is one of your priorities.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
All right. Seeing no one else in the queue, do I need to restate the motion? I think I can. It was made by Winter, seconded by McEwen. It was giving direction to staff, 1, to look for additional funding for the hamster and the C3 teams, 2, to bring back the costs and potential proposals for CIP improvements, including lighting and cameras. 3, that we consider the cost of a pilot program using hospitality or ambassador personnel on a temporary basis, but then also bring back the relevant cost of putting a sworn officer so we can compare the cost of the two. 4, that we approach the core group or any other private entities that might have an interest in helping us keep Reed Park available to residents. 5, that we give direction to investigate and evaluate potential regulation of the beach, including beach closure or other limited access to the beach. 6, that we ask staff to explore the possibility of neighborhood initiatives that might help activate Reed Park or any other park that's experiencing issues. The subsidiary of that is that we think about grants similar to the micro grants program that we did to community groups, and that staff report back on the effect that having those 20 additional officers when they are all back up, when they are all on the payroll and deployed, and the effect that they will have too soon, the effect that they will have on the issues that we're discussing tonight.
There was one part left out, and that was my addition, that as we investigate closing the beach, we also investigate and evaluate where the people who currently are sleeping on the beach could go so they don't end up in our residential neighborhood carports.
So noted. That's the motion. May we have a roll call vote, Ms. Anderson-Warren, so that our eager beavers outside there can get back in the room.
Okay, Councilmember Himmerich.
Yes.
Councilmember McKeown.
Yes.
Councilmember Winter.
Yes.
Councilmember Hara.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day.
Yes.
And Mayor Davis.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone who came out tonight for discussing this important issue. And now we can have our city attorney and Councilmember Morena return.
Sometimes the audio is delayed, in the other room, but maybe it's advanced.
That's right. Maybe they knew how we were going to vote. Or maybe they were trying to give us a hint that we had gone on long enough.
Do you want me to open that for you?
They've completed it.
Is this your-
So I think they put in.
Can you call the item, Ms. Anderson-Warren, and then I'll request council to make any disclosures regarding any ex-parte communications.
Yes, we have item 6A, which is Appeal 19ENT-0016 of the disapproval of structure of merit designation, 18ENT-0316 for 610 California Avenue. Consideration of a designation application to determine whether the subject resident should be designated as a structure of merit. And you have the appellant, the applicant, and one extra request to speak.
And before I have the ex-parte disclosures, I know I have the appellant. All right, so do they get 10 minutes each, the appellant and the applicant? All right, before we begin the staff report, do we have any ex-parte communications to disclose? Councilmember Winterer.
So I actually had no communications about this, but I should disclose that for a number of years, and since this is germane to why this matter is before us, since the Landmarks Commission had to recuse themselves because of this matter, I have been previously a member of the Santa Monica Conservancy, but my membership has lapsed and I am not a member in 2019, and I do not believe that my prior membership in that organization will in any way interfere with my ability to render an objective and unbiased opinion on this matter.
A lapsed conservator. Councilmember McEwen.
I have the same circumstance as Councilmember Winterer with the same evaluation of my ability to rule on this without prejudice.
Councilmember Morena.
I spoke with the Conservancy, Carol, about this, but just about what their position was and made no inference one way or another.
Okay, can you tell us when that is? When you do ex parties, we need to know approximately when, day and time.
That was on Sunday at approximately 3:30.
All right, thank you. Any other disclosures? All right, thank you. We'll have a staff report then.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Steve Mizokami from City Planning. Before we begin, the property owner is also available here and is also requesting to speak for 5 minutes.
All right, why don't you go ahead with the staff report and we'll think about that. Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is an appeal of a structure of merit designation that was disapproved for the property located at 610 California Avenue. A brief summary of the timeframes for this application. In August of 2018, the property owner filed a demolition permit application to remove the subject single unit residence as well as the detached garage. On October 18th, in response to the demolition permit application, the Santa Monica Conservancy filed the structure of merit designation application for the subject property. And on January 14th of this year, the item was scheduled before the Landmarks Commission. However, the Commission was unable to conduct the hearing or take any action on the application due to a lack of quorum. And the application was deemed disapproved since no action was taken by the Commission within the 90-day review period for structures of merits as established by the Landmarks Ordinance. The appellant has appealed this disapproval to allow the City Council to consider the application and also believes that the property is eligible for designation. The City Council, in its de novo review of this appeal, shall determine whether the subject residence is eligible for designation based on the structure of merit designation criteria. So the subject property is located in the R2, which is a low-density residential district, and is developed with a one-story residence with a parcel size of approximately 5,000 square feet. The primary residence was constructed in 1912 with the detached accessory garage constructed in 1927. A structure of merit assessment was prepared by the city's consultant, which is Ostache and Associates Consulting, who finds that the building is eligible for designation as a structure over 50 years in age and a rare intact early example of a craftsman bungalow, and as an architectural style that is no longer prevalent in the city. The period of significance for this property is 1912, which was reflecting the original construction date of the building. This is a transitional craftsman-style cottage, which was popular in Santa Monica during the first quarter of the 20th century. Based on its complex hipped roof, wood-lap siding, its fenestration, and also the date of construction, the modest bungalow exhibits a transition phase between the hipped roof cottage as well as the craftsman bungalow, and hence the name. Minor alterations to this building have been made since its original construction, but it also continues to retain its overall integrity of design, workmanship, materials, location, and feeling. Character-defining features include its general scale and massing, including its horizontal wood siding, hip and gable roof, its prominent gable dormer at the front sloping of the property, the front roof elevation, its wide overhanging eaves and fascia boards, and projecting wood windowsills, and of course the craftsman-inspired entry door. Historical context during the early century, within the underlying Santa Monica Township tract, smaller residences were dominant in this area, consisting of modest hip-roof cottages and, of course, the transitional craftsman bungalows, which were prevalent at this time. By the mid-1950s and early 60s, older housing was replaced by modern apartment buildings. And currently the area has been infilled with post-war era apartments with the older housing typically isolated and clustered in small groups. The subject property is an example of the early housing constructed in the neighborhood during the tract's early development. Here is a list of the structure of merit designation criteria per the ordinance. In summary, both the consultant and staff finds that the subject property satisfies the following criteria, with the exception of criteria B3, and that's the last criteria down below. It's been kind of shaded out. More specifically, under criterion B1, the subject residence is a rare, intact, early example of the Craftsman bungalow style in this section of the town of Santa Monica tract. And specifically under criteria B2, the residence is an early example of the 1910s Craftsman architecture, which is a style no longer prevalent in this section of the tract, as well as the neighborhood north of Wilshire Boulevard. Accordingly, staff recommends structure of merit designation of the primary residence, however, excluding the detached garage in the back, which was constructed outside of the period of significance for the property. That concludes the staff report, and we're available for any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Councilmember Morena, were you trying to?
No, if I may, Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
We're on the radio. Nobody knows who's speaking if you don't say.
That's right. Councilmember Kevin McEwen is
We
about
just
to
renewed that
speak.
contract with KCRW, so let's make the most of it. Actually, we may not be on the air tonight
It's a
because this is
special
a
meeting.
special meeting. I have a question for legal staff. We have the owner of the property who wishes to speak. My understanding of past practice is that would be part of the applicant's time.
So, Councilmember, you've had varying past practice. One, for example, for 2600 Wilshire, you've provided that property owner with their separate 10 minutes, and so you did not choose to have the applicant and the owner split the time. If the council doesn't take a vote by majority act, then the property owner would only receive 2 minutes. But by majority vote, the council could choose to grant the property owner additional time.
Okay, so if we do nothing by default, the two of them together get 12 minutes.
No, it actually
10
is
for the applicant,
10 for the
property
applicant,
owner.
10 for the appellant, according.
No, I'm not talking about the appellant. I'm
Okay.
talking about the property owner wishing to speak and asking for 5 minutes. I think I'm fine with leaving the default the way it is.
Councilmember Morena?
Thanks for the report. So they have a demolition permit at this point pulled? Is that right?
No, the demolition permit application was submitted in August, and that's actually started kind of the consideration and the review process. From that point, an application for the structure of merit was then filed, and then that's where we then moved to the Landmarks Commission, and then upon appeal. So that's where we are. So the property owner does not have a demolition permit in hand.
They applied for one?
Correct.
Gotcha. Did they also apply for a building permit?
No, the property owner has been in the works of trying to get entitlements in the past. At some point they had obtained Architecture Review Board approval for a project, but that has lapsed. But even currently right now, and I think the property owner will be able to speak a little bit more to it, what their current plans are for the property, but it isn't to demolish the structure any longer.
So the current owner doesn't want to demolish the structure?
Correct, yeah. I believe their intentions are to rehabilitate the property, including the front building.
Gotcha. And I know after one of my back and forth with David, you guys reach out to the property owners and you guys talk about all of the benefits of keeping things like this, cool old stuff, I call it. Did you guys have that contact with them, and what was the outcome of that?
Sure. So with all of our designation applications, whether or not they're submitted by the property owner or a third party on somebody else's property, we have the same conversation, and just in terms of informing them of the Landmarks program and what it's intended to do, and then of course the benefits and incentives of having a designated property. But then also if they do have a designated property, what is it like moving forward with alterations, and what does that mean? So, and with this property owner, we had had some discussions on that in terms of what it means to, if potentially this becomes a structure of merit, how does alterations in the future work, and then of course what are the available incentives?
Got it. Thank you.
For the property.
All right, Councilmember Himmelrich.
So I just want to follow up on the allocation of time. So we've had a staff report supporting the appellant. We're going to have the appellant for 10 minutes, and then we're going to let the person who owns the property only speak for 2 minutes.
So here's the way it's going to go, unless the council moves to do it differently, and it is within our power, as I understand it, by a motion to do it differently. The appellant gets 10 minutes. The applicant gets 10 minutes.
Thank you.
The owner of the property gets, under our current rules, 2 minutes.
So the appellant and the applicant are on the same side.
Yes, but I asked that at the beginning and was told they each get 10 separate minutes. So they get 20 minutes between the two of them. The owner of the property gets 2.
And I would like to suggest...
I think you should move, not suggest.
Okay, I would like to move that we give the owner of the property 5 minutes.
Second.
All right. Moved by Himmelrich, seconded by Winterer. Do it by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. All right. Any abstentions? All right. So that passes by a vote of 6-1. So Mr. Gable, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, will have 5 minutes when he speaks. Not yet, but all right. Do you have any other questions, Councilmember Himmelrich? No, that was it. All right. I was about to make a comment, but I'll refrain. All right, so we will begin with the appellant. Is that correct, Ms. Anderson-Warren? The appellant, then the applicant? Yes. All right. Welcome, Ms. Fresco. You have 10 minutes. Do you want the clerk to reserve any time for rebuttal?
Yeah, I'll probably use about 6 minutes, maybe a little more, and then when I'm done, whatever's left, I'll save for the end, if that's okay.
You can use as much as you like. Whatever you don't use will be saved for rebuttal.
That's what it is. Okay. What do I press to change the picture, please? This? I press this? Okay. I see how it works. Good evening, everyone. I filed this appeal because the original application was technically denied without a hearing before the Landmarks Commission. This is a very strong application that deserves an opportunity for a positive determination. 610 California Avenue unquestionably qualifies as a structure of merit based on the evidence presented in the application, the consultant's report, and the report from city staff. In 1912, members of the Episcopal Church in Santa Monica built this hipped-roof transitional craftsman bungalow for retired Reverend Edward Davis. In 1927, a garage with swinging barn doors was added to the site. Vehicle access to the garage is via 2 strips of concrete, sometimes called a ribbon or California driveway, through an otherwise grassy yard. The house is referred to as a traditional craftsman bungalow because it has a hipped roof typical of houses in the period just before Craftsman, but is consistent with the Craftsman style in all its other detailing. It has a very high level of integrity, failing only in the measure of context, because the surrounding neighborhood was significantly redeveloped starting in the 1950s. For 30 years, following Santa Monica's founding in 1875, the town was concentrated west of 7th Street and south of Wilshire Boulevard, with scattered homes as far as Washington Avenue west of 4th Street. There was also a pocket of posh vacation homes in Ocean Park, established in 1875, west of 3rd Street between Strand and Pico. When Ocean Park began to boom between 1900 and 1902, the city trustees began planning to annex the rural areas east of the town limits at 17th Street and Lincoln Boulevard, up to Centinela, and north of the town limit at Montana Avenue, up to Santa Monica Canyon, and then to become a charter city. Simultaneously, Santa Monica founders Jones and Baker divested themselves of their remaining holdings in the San Vicente Ranch. By 1905, with the Santa Monica City Charter in place, Greater Santa Monica, as they called the newly annexed areas, was aggressively subdivided and started to move out of its rural period, as did the surrounding areas of West LA and Brentwood. Development in Santa Monica began to spread east slowly at first, and more quickly as the boom of the 1920s approached. By the time the 1909 Sanborn map was created, there was still no development on the blocks immediately surrounding the subject parcel. Thus, we can see that the house at 610 California is not only the last of its type of residence in the area, but was also one of the first. In the summer of 1873, Edward Davis, a 27-year-old British deacon, was appointed to an Episcopal mission in West Africa, where he married Eliza Ware, a widowed missionary wife. Their work was interrupted when Davis became so ill he was sent back to England to ensure his recovery. The newlyweds regrouped and moved to Washington Territory in the United States in 1876, where they continued their work with the church for over 30 years. In 1909, Edward and Eliza, recently retired, moved to Santa Monica to be near Edward's sister. After noting that the Davises were just getting by on a meager pension, Reverend John D.H. Brown, a well-known Santa Monica evangelist, wrote letters to clergy all over the country asking for contributions to build a home for the devout retirees who had spent their lives serving the church in the U.S. and in Africa and can now barely cover rent. It was early affordable housing. Consequently, in 1912, a permit was pulled for a $1,500 five-room home at 610 California Avenue to be built by George Peasgood. Unfortunately, 6 weeks after they moved in, Eliza passed away. A few months later, Davis's sister, Lydia Strother, also recently widowed, moved in. Reverend Edward Davis passed away in 1922. In 1927, Strother pulled the permit to build the garage. The boom of the 1920s, which led to the substantial infill of the neighborhood, was triggered in part by the rise in popularity of the automobile, thus the need for this accessory structure. Strother passed away in 1931. Whether the Davises of 610 California Avenue contributed directly to Santa Monica history or not is not relevant to structure of merit criteria, but their history adds depth to an understanding of both the simplicity of this vernacular structure as well as the effort to endow it with economical elegance and good taste in deference to the people it was so generously built for. I support the findings proposed by staff, but I would like to suggest a few small revisions. In the last sentence in criteria B1 and B2, I suggest the words appears to satisfy be replaced with satisfies. The wording is a vestige from the consultant's report's deliberate and appropriate language of recommendation rather than determination, but it's not appropriate for finding. In finding B2, I suggest specifically listing more of the character-defining features as the Landmarks Commission typically does, so the STOA contains a sufficiently complete summary of the record. I gave you a little red line through the city clerk for that. There's a great deal of well-documented evidence in the record showing that the transitional craftsman bungalow at 610 California Avenue qualifies for structure of merit designation, meeting 4 out of 5 of the criteria for structure of merit, though only 1 is required. Please vote for the designation.
Thank you, Ms. Fresco.
Thank you.
And how much time does she have left, Ms. Anderson-Ward? 4 minutes, all right. Yeah, I think she only gave her 7 on the clock. Good evening, Ms. Lemline. You also have 10 minutes. Would you like to reserve any for rebuttal?
No, at this point, no, but I can assure you I'm not going to take 10 now. So I guess I will reserve for rebuttal if that should be needed.
All right.
The application for designation of this property as a structure of merit was filed by the Conservancy in response to a demolition application. For many years, any property over 40 years old submitted for demolition was reviewed by the Landmarks Commission to determine if it should be evaluated as a potential landmark or structure of merit. If the Commission did not act, the demolition permit was automatically approved. As you know, in June of 2018, this review was suspended while planning staff and the city attorney's office reviewed the ordinance in light of recent legal issues, and in November, council responded with an emergency interim ordinance intended to resolve these concerns. The suspension of the Landmarks Commission review placed responsibility for attempting to identify designation-worthy properties about to be lost to the community, with the community, a responsibility the Conservancy took very seriously. Our advocacy committee, composed of board members and other volunteers, intensified its monthly review of the demo list to determine if any properties should be studied further and possibly recommended to our board of directors for pursuit of a designation. I should note here that the Conservancy's advocacy decision-making does not involve our general membership unless one of them brings to us a specific property or issue that would be brought to the attention of the advocacy committee. After the committee's review and recommendation, it is our policy that the Conservancy board makes the decision, which the advocacy committee then executes. This property, which appeared on the demo list in September, came to our attention as a rare survival of the early residential development of the area north of the original downtown. We investigated its history and architectural characteristics and then recommended to the board of directors that it should be nominated for designation. At the time, we considered pursuing designation as a landmark, but after considering the vernacular nature of its design, decided to submit as a structure of merit because, due to the time constraints on demolition decisions, there would be no opportunity for a second submission if the commission did not support a landmark designation, and the historic property would be lost. 610 was the first property we have submitted for designation to be heard by the commission. We were delighted to see that both the staff and city's consultant concurred in recommending designation. At the commission meeting, however, we were caught completely by surprise when, at the hearing for this demo-threatened property, the commissioners who were Conservancy members recused themselves from the proceeding, resulting in cancellation of the hearing and the ability to move forward with consideration of the designation. As indicated by our initial decision to submit a nomination, we strongly support the designation of this property and urge you to approve the appeal. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I would like to make one final note. It seems that the procedures for cases where the applicant is not the owner do not seem to be very well defined, and we hope that this will be rectified when the long-awaited landmarks ordinance update takes place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lemline. And Ms. Anderson-Warren, how much time does she have left?
22 seconds.
All right, thank you. At this point, we will hear from the property owner, Mr. Gable, for 5 minutes.
Hello, good evening. I don't come very often here, so I don't know how to handle it, but I'll give you some background. We bought the property, my wife and I, 10 years ago. There was a lot of changes. We were going to build a 3-level unit, and we decided not to go with it. It sat for 10 years. We haven't touched it. We don't even live there. And now we decided that we want to move into the property. And we really like it, and we like the way it is. And since my wife and I were the only ones who are retiring, it's sufficient for us to live in the property, and we'd love to live there. We don't expect to do anything on the property. We don't expect to destroy it and build a building or anything like that. We just want to live in the property. That's all we want to do. The property is it's very, very old and needs a lot of maintenance, which we're going to do. The only thing we're going to do is we change the windows, because the windows are they're not climate friendly. So that's about the only thing we're going to do. The structure is going to remain the same. We're not going to do anything to the structure. The garage might have some updating, because it's very, very old, and structure it's not very fixed. Other than that, there's nothing we're going to do.
All right. Councilmember Himmelrich has some questions for you.
I actually just have one question. So my understanding is that one of the reasons we're here is that you've asked to demolish the property.
No, we're not. Okay. No, I don't think so.
So,
that was all the first filing that we did about 10 years ago. There was in there, but now we don't want to do it anymore.
But my understanding is you have a demolition permit pending, and
for the garage.
Thank you.
Councilmember Morena.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
So, so at this point, you're only planning to demo the garage, is
Yes,
that right? Okay.
correct.
And in changing the windows, are you planning to keep the same windows, or I know that climate-wise they're not good, you mentioned.
Correct.
But are you planning to keep the integrity of the windows so that the home looks the same, or how are you trying to define the design of the windows?
Well, they're going to remain the same, but if you see the door is not set entering the living room. If you were inside the house, there's a divider wall right at the end of the door. If you look from right to left, there's a dividing wall, and then you have the living room on the side. It's covered by the trees. So we will put the door on the other side of this door. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. That's the only changes we're going to do to the house in the outside. In the inside, kitchen and all that stuff is going to be updated.
Sure. So I know you've spoken with some of the city staff. Do you have a good idea of what a designation would do to your property, value-wise and or historically?
Value-wise, I don't know because I have no intention to sell, so I don't care. But I'll tell you one thing: we have a lot of offers. I mean, I have people knocking on my door every day.
Yeah.
Okay, and we chase them away. We have no intention of selling. I'm not even listening to offers.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gable. There are no other questions, so thank you for your testimony. We have, since we don't need to designate it a late chit, since the speaker only requested 1 minute, Derek Devermont. Mr. Gable, you can sit down. Thank you. Oh, that was the 13.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. Sorry, you handed it to me like I needed it now. All right, then that closes the public hearing. The matter is before the council. I'm sorry. I have appellants and applicants. Do they have any? All right, Ms. Fresco. Sorry about that.
Hopefully this will answer the rest of the questions. As a structure of merit, this property and its story would become part of the social and cultural record of the city. Alterations to structures of merit are not subject to the same high level of review as landmark properties, but a number of valuable incentives are designed to encourage owners to choose to preserve their structures of merit and comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards. By taking advantage of special provisions, it is possible to realize any code-compliant building program while also preserving the integrity of the historic resource, often with unexpectedly interesting results. The California Historic Building Code recognizes the unique issues that arise in maintaining and adaptively reusing historic buildings. The code provides alternative building regulations for preservation and rehabilitation projects to ensure contributing elements and features can remain in place while conserving energy, addressing fire, seismic, and safety issues, and meeting other goals of the regular code. The Mills Act contracts between property owners and the city result in valuable tax savings that can be between 40% and 60% each year for newly improved or newly purchased older properties. Because valuations of Mills Act properties are determined by the income approach to value rather than by the standard market approach to value, the purpose of the Mills Act is to compensate owners for some of the extra costs of rehabilitation. The City of Santa Monica also provides incentives for preserving historic resources in the zoning ordinance. Special exemptions are designed to help with known areas of conflict between typical historic construction and modern standards related to driveways, nonconforming architectural features or uses, relocation, bed and breakfasts, and parking. There are modified variance findings for designated historic resources and a waiver for all planning division permit fees. Also, major modifications may be permitted for designated historic resources, including structures of merit where owners have committed to historic preservation. Modifications can address building height, number of stories, setbacks, parcel coverage, building envelope, and more. 610 California Avenue happens to be within a special area where a modification may allow an extra 6 feet of height for new construction within a project site that includes a historic resource. This enables a third story to help unlock buildable square footage that can't be accessed as a result of preservation of the historic resource. These laws provide significant financial rewards and a code-compliant path to rehabilitation of historic resources that allows them to be safe, energy efficient, and compatible with modern lifestyles, so they remain a vital part of the Santa Monica landscape while telling our story. Please uphold the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fresco. Councilmember Himmelrich, I think, has a question.
Good evening, Ms. Fresco. How are you?
Good, thank you.
My question is this: and look, I know, and everybody here knows that you're an expert on this, right? And other members of the Conservancy are experts. And I think we have here a homeowner who may not be an expert or, in fact, have any sophistication about this, right? Are there some resources in the city that he could resource to let him know the benefits to him and what he might do to maximize the value of the property and conform to historic resources?
Meet your resources.
Well, so, and the Conservancy probably is also a resource, yes?
Yeah, I mean, basically, city staff is there to help applicants, and if you're trying to restore, repair, replace, rehabilitate on a historic property, all of the things that I just presented in my little infomercial there
that was excellent, by the way,
are available, and staff, when looking at the specific plans, can say, oh, we can use this rule to enable you to do that, and we can make these windows safer and more energy efficient using this little trick. And there's all kinds of special ways to meet the code and preserve the building that are a little different than the normal route.
So if Mr. Gable, in fact, wants to keep it pretty much as is, he can go to staff and say, what can I do to get all these tax breaks and all these incentives and all of this other stuff, and yet improve the value of my property by making it a historic resource? Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day.
Thank you, Commissioner. I actually have a question for staff.
Okay.
Given the testimony that we heard from the property owners, I wonder if you could comment as to some of the changes that they suggested for the property and how those might work.
Mm-hmm. So a few of the alterations, I think, that they had expressed for immediate repair, I think they had mentioned that the roof needed to be re-roofed, the windows to be repaired, and I think the siding. So I think in terms of the alterations, when you have in-kind replacement of the roofing material, that is something that's consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards of how we're supposed to work and rehabilitate with designated properties. When it comes to the windows, always the quick change is always to think to replace, but according to the standards, we're always looking first to repair. And these are existing wood windows, and we would then, the property owner would have like a historic preservation person who reviews windows to be able to see what can be repaired and then how that can be repaired. And if it's not able to be repaired, then do you replace? And that's when the in-kind replacement discussion happens. So these are the things that our staff, we have discussions about on a daily basis on how to rehabilitate our properties and how they can be consistent with the standards.
Okay, and the garage is not an issue?
Yeah, and we are recommending that the structure of merit just pertains to the front property. The garage was constructed after kind of that period of significance. But a lot of our designated properties, the garages are typically not included. They're usually in the back, and the primary house right up front is usually the building that is kind of telling the story about the historic.
The other thing they mentioned was moving the front door.
The front door, I guess I don't know if that would be like a relocation of the front door. The front door is called out in the discussion as kind of having that craftsman type of element. If, depending on kind of the character defining features that are included in the designation, if that is included, then a similar type of door. And, looking at the door, you've got the window and the glazing, and then, of course, I think probably the original hardware that might be on there. So if those are deemed as character defining features, then that would be something that would be maintained for the future.
Okay. So there's certainly some benefits available, but it's clear that there'll be some restrictions and some care will need to be taken in order to live up to this standard.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember McEwen?
Well, as the lone dissenting vote on modifying the presentation times, I just want to point out that the owner's presentation took 90 seconds, well within the original 2 minutes. So I think all sides were fairly heard, and other council members have investigated what the options are for the owner, what the implications are of changes, etc. So the question actually before the council tonight is whether this house qualifies as a structure of merit. And based on the modified findings given to us on the dais and talked about in the testimony by Ms. Fresco, labeled Structure of Merit Findings for 610 California Avenue, and appearing to have been page 4 of some larger document, I find that the findings are sufficient to designate this house, and I move that we uphold the appeal and do so.
Second.
All right, I get to pick. Moved by McEwen, seconded by O'Day.
Second.
All right, Greg, you were. All right, Councilmember Winter.
Well, I just want to clarify for the record that Councilmember McEwen, your motion was based on these findings that were delivered to us by the appellant.
Yes.
And I just want to clarify that actually staff had the same document.
Staff has it, but I think there were a couple of minor changes here where instead of it saying appears to, it now says satisfies.
Well, there's more red line stuff than what I have in front of me.
This is the document that I am accepting as the findings.
Okay, but it's not just the taking out the appears to, it's adding some other language.
There are several changes, and I will give a copy of this to the city attorney.
I just want to make sure.
It's before all the council members, so I think we all can see what it is.
Has staff seen this document, just so we can be clear? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we all know we're talking about.
It looks like Ms. Fresco has more copies if we need them.
Yes, we're holding up the document.
Holding up the
you
one
gave
that
us,
the clerks distributed.
But I didn't
okay.
want to vote on it and leave the
This has Nina Fresco
staff
written all
didn't know
over
what
it.
we voted on.
All right. Anything further, Councilmember Winter?
No.
All right. Moved by McEwen, seconded by O'Day. May we have a vote, Ms. Anderson-Warren?
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day?
Yes.
Councilmember Hara?
Yes.
Councilmember Winter?
Yes.
Councilmember McKeown?
Yes.
Councilmember Hillmerich?
Yes.
Councilmember Morena?
Yes.
And Mayor Davis.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Next, we have item 13A, appointment to one unscheduled vacancy on the Social Services Commission for a term ending June 30th, 2021, and you have one request to speak.
Yes, we do. Indeed. Derek Devermont.
Hi everyone, I'll make this quick. It's getting a little late, and I hope you all brought umbrellas or raincoats because it's pouring outside, just so you all know. I applied for the Social Services Commission. As many of you know, I'm part of a practice that does Social Security, Disability, and SSI benefits. We've helped over 60,000 homeless people who have been seeking benefits. We are interactive with general relief.
Excuse me, Mr. Devermont. Excuse me, folks. Can you take the conversation outside, please?
I don't mind.
No, but it's distracting for us.
Start over.
His name is Derek Devermont.
We've handled over 60,000 homeless clients in all aspects of funding, from county-provided general relief, SSI, Social Security, Disability, state disability benefits. I am familiar with their housing issues, their funding issues, their health issues, and their access to all of these. And I would ask for your vote. Submitted.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Devermont. The matter is before the council.
I move Derek Devermont.
All right. Are there any other nominations?
Yes. I nominate Susan Einbinder.
All right. Any other nominations? It helps if you buzz in so I can recognize you then. Councilmember Hara.
I nominate Noah Itman.
Councilmember Morena.
Nicholas Ralston.
It's going to take some effort then. All right, so let's make sure we've got this out. We have Devermont, Einbinder, Itman,
and Ralston.
Councilmember Himmelrich? Oh, here, let me remove you.
I'm just waiting to vote, right?
That's all right.
Oh, sorry.
So let's give this a try.
Okay.
I'm going to do it.
Councilmember Morena.
Ralston.
Councilmember Himmelrich.
Devermont.
Councilmember McKeown.
Einbinder.
Councilmember Winter.
Devermont.
Councilmember Hara.
Itman.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Day.
Devermont.
And Mayor Davis.
Devermont. Mr. Devermont, welcome to the Social Services Commission.
Change my vote to Devermont.
All right.
I'll change mine to Devermont.
Okay.
All right. Since this is a special meeting, we do not have public comment, but unfortunately we do have an adjournment. Councilmember McEwen?
That came up rather quickly, so I didn't quite have it ready. Forgive me. Council, I'm going to ask that we take a moment tonight to adjourn in memory of our State Senator Ben Allen's father-in-law, his wife Melanie Luthern's father, Michael Clark Luthern of New Matamoros, Ohio. Mr. Luthern, known as Ziggy, taught his children a love of nature and the value of an education. Ziggy Luthern, 59, died peacefully on February 24th in the company of family. He leaves behind loved one in Ohio, of course, and here in Santa Monica, his daughter, Melanie Luthern, who I think we all know, his son-in-law, Senator Ben Allen, who I'm sure we all know, and Ziggy's new grandson, Ezra, who we will all know soon if we don't already. We know it's a sad time for the Allens, and we send our sympathies.
Councilmember Hara?
I would also like to ask that we adjourn in the memory of Claudia Fragoso, who passed away on February 17th. She was the longest tenant in our building. She lived there for 45 years. She was the care provider for her mom, who passed away 9 years ago. She suffered from Alzheimer's. She lost her sister, who she also became a care provider to cancer, and she passed away 2.5 years ago. And Claudia lost her fight to cancer as well on the 17th of February. And although Claudia didn't have any children of her own, she definitely was a mother to all of the kids in our buildings. And it speaks a lot to a person, character, and loving nature that all of the kids actually seeked her. So I wanted to make sure that I honored her memory. Most of maybe half of the tenants there have been there for a long time as well, me included. But in the audience, we do have one of her sisters present, and we also have some of our tenants from the building that are here to ensure also that we keep that memory alive. And she will be missed terribly.
Well, we expend our deepest sympathies to everyone who suffered losses. And with that, we will adjourn. Our next meeting is March 26th. So we will see you all then. Thank you very much, everyone.